just running.
Okay. Hello, everyone. We're going to call to order the meeting for the Menlo Park Fire Protection District special board meeting study session. Roll call, Michelle.
Director Bernstein?
Present.
Director Blue?
Here.
Director Jones?
Here.
Director Crawley? Present. Director Solano?
Here.
Okay, you know, I'm the speaker, so we'll bypass that. Okay. We have two items on the agenda today for the special board study session. First is to discuss response standards and other district metrics. And then the second item is to discuss the current state of our emergency medical service, EMS system, and potential improvements. So before I see it's in the flag, I'm going to turn it over to our chief, and he will take us through those two agenda items and any other Jersey folks speak.
Well, welcome board members. I will say before we do this item, I was just chatting with Nicole, like, how does it work with public comment? So we obviously don't have public comment via Zoom. Michelle, I don't know if you call for public comment, but we have staff members here. Yeah.
I think just for the record, we can note if there's any public comment for each item as we go through, but there's no public comment for non-agenda items.
Oh, okay. Anyway, if there's no public comment, I will dig into the agenda. First, I'll just start by talking a little bit about why we're here, some of the logistics. If you haven't already noticed, we've got food over here. The intent is this kind of to be a working board meeting, a little bit different than normal, with hopefully some free flow of questions and information with staff and myself. Logistics-wise, restrooms are just through these glass doors here and down the hallway to the left. Feel free to get up and refill your plates. We purchased enough food for any members over here and the public. Obviously, it's pretty lightly attended, so feel free to take home some leftovers at the end of the meeting too. And we'll take whatever's left back over to the fire station or admin for tomorrow. Time frame. We have until 9, and Michelle has let us know that we are going to be evicted at 9, so we will try and make sure we are all done and wrapped up by then. We'll try and split our time pretty much in half. And, you know, and kind of leading up to this, I also heard some feedback about, as we go through these things, part of it is intended to be kind of an educational, informational item for the board to share with you what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then also to ask for feedback from the board and questions from the board, and hopefully get some direction from the board. We don't need decisions tonight. In fact, we have agendized it so we can actually have any decisions made, but give direction to myself and staff to go back and potentially come forward with some additional work for future board meetings. That is what the hope is. And also, one of our board members had shared at some point in time, you know, please don't come to us with answers. We don't necessarily want the answer. We just want some information and some conversation. And let's collectively come together and try and develop some answers and some solutions moving forward. So as we give this is my first try at one of these special board meetings like this. We'll see how it all works out. So the first item deals with our response time objectives. And I think you'll hear me refer to them throughout the night as objectives rather than a standard, something that's really something that's more aspirational. You know, where do we want to go? I'm going to give you a little bit of background information about where the district has been in the past related to the response time objectives. Once we get partially through this, we'll actually talk our way through some of the measurements that we're currently measuring, and then talk a little bit about what we might want to measure or some potential future objectives that we might want to apply our metrics to in the future. So to begin with, my first thing is in your packet, you don't have to turn to it, but I'll chat a little bit about the standards of cover study we had from Citygate. They're a consultant that we hired back in 2015 to help us develop, at least in part, some recommendations for our coverage, for stations. As a result of that study, we actually increased staffing with our battalion chiefs and added an additional truck. They also made some recommendations back then for some response time metrics or standards. And when they did that, they had recommended, and I'm looking at page 2 of the actual Citygate study, page 16 in your packet, if that's correct. And I'm just referring to the very last paragraph under 1.3 on that page 2, where they say, for effective outcomes on serious medical emergencies and to keep serious but still emerging fires small, best practices recommend that the first due fire unit should arrive within 7 minutes of fire dispatch alerting the fire unit 90% of the time. And that was broken down a little bit further when they were talking on page 21 or page 7 of the report. That 7 minutes should be broken down so it equates to 1 minute for dispatch time. And dispatch time is the amount of time it takes from call pickup at PSC to when they actually tone us out or delivery at the fire station. 2 minutes.
Excuse me, Chief.
Sure.
I think there's more than one page number on here.
There's a packet number, which is 21, and page 7 is page 7 of the actual report.
Can you tell me where on the page?
Down at the bottom.
Lower left
Oh,
is
okay.
the
It's
packet
not a
number.
chart. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So also, of that 7 minute breakdown, 2 minutes was allocated for company turnout time. Turnout time is, once the tones go off at the station, that's the amount of time it takes for the firefighters to hear the bell, move down to the engine bay, put on the proper PPE, perhaps check out the maps, and actually push en route. So it doesn't measure wheels moving, but in theory it should be when the wheels are moving or just about to move. So 2 minutes for that and 4 minutes for travel time is what the allocation was. Whether that was based on science or past practices, they call it best practices or not, we'll get into that a little bit when we start talking about NFPA standards. But I do want to share, then a little further on in the packet, on page 24 of the packet, lower left-hand page, you'll see 24, and it's resolution, this is a attachment D, and it's a copy of a board resolution adopted in 2015, resolution 1818. And it adopted the recommendations of the standards of cover study and the recommendations they made. And that's to adopt a response time standard of 7 minutes, as broken down. You see on page 25, third-ish paragraph, it basically says, the role of the first response unit shall be to arrive on scene of all code 3 emergencies within 7 minutes, 90% of the time, from receipt of the 911 call in the dispatch center. So it's, again, like I said, 1 minute for dispatch, 2 minutes for a turnout, 4 minutes for response time. So, and then there was also a direction for the fire chief to measure this performance quarterly and to report back to the board at least annually. Okay, and then in the next page, I just want to share, is an annual report prepared by Chief John Long to the board, dated November 15th, 2016. And it talked about, the standards of cover study, and then I just have to share that on the next page, page 28, and in this staff report, it says, we're meeting our goals. We're actually exceeding the goals. We're hitting it 92% of the time, not just 90% of the time. But on page 28, I just want to point something out, and I don't know why there's the omission, but when you look at the top of page 28, the all data for first units only, and you can see it highlighted 92%. That is what they're hitting in 7 minutes or less. They've omitted the dispatch times, right? So I don't know why. I just want to share that back then, whatever was reported to the board was not accurate, right? We were not measuring a component of the dispatch times that the board had adopted. So, basically the reporting was not accurate, and in all likelihood, and I can't go back and recreate it, but in all likelihood, we probably were not meeting the metrics. I bet you we were down somewhere in the mid to high 80s. What I'm passing out to you here now is Chief McDonald. I just asked him today to go and, we haven't previously been measuring this, but this is using our current metrics for the last year. I asked them, will you look and see where we would be at the 90th percentile if we included our dispatch times? Right now, our data analysis, as you see as we get into it, we're not combining them all together, but we should, because from the time somebody dials 911 to the time we arrive on scene is the amount of time it takes us, whether we have control over the dispatch times or not. That's the amount of time. So you can see here at the 90th percentile, we are at 7 minutes and 26 seconds. So we're a little bit over. And again, I can't attest to what the numbers would have been in 2016. I just wanted to share with you that the information that was being provided back then was not accurate. So moving forward, we want to make sure that whatever direction the board gives, and we should at some point in time, if at the end of this meeting you give us direction to help us develop some reasonable response time objectives, we should acknowledge the old resolution. I don't know if we need to, if we adopt a new one, just nullify that or how that ends up working, rescind that resolution and adopt new standards. And they should, we may choose to actually live by what those objectives that were adopted back then, or we may have some, but I just will say whatever it is the board ultimately approves, we'll provide you with all of that information. Yes?
Help me on here too. Looking at the document that you referenced on page 28, the 90 percentile, and the turnout, travel, and response.
Yes.
In the sheet, and you said the document that you gave us, is the added times that should be, because what I'm seeing is 90 percentile, 7 minutes and 26 seconds, and then it had
It doesn't break down all of the components in there, but I will tell you that the PSAP, and the PSAP is the primary answering point, right? That's when fire dispatch picks up. The PSAP, from when they pick up to our arrival on the scene, is 7 minutes and 26 seconds. What you don't see, is we don't have the breakdown, is that includes dispatch time, turnout time, and travel time all together. I'm sure we could, at some point, kind of break it all down so it looks a little bit more consistent with this,
But I think Aaron's report is saying that at the 726 at 90th percentile, a minute 31 of that was dispatch time.
yeah, we were just, yes, you're right.
Yeah, the PS.
Okay.
Yeah, what we were trying to point out there was at the 90th percentile, there's a minute and 31 seconds there.
Right.
I can't say what it was back in 2016, but likely there should have been a minute and 31 seconds added to those numbers. Yeah, Director Bernstein.
Yeah, I think it's much higher than that because the official definition of response time includes from the time somebody calls and asks for help,
Yes.
which includes the time that the county has, and that's not included in the 1 minute 30 seconds.
Yes,
And
sir.
the county's taking about a minute and a half. So if we took 7 minutes and 30 seconds or whatever, we'd be up to almost 9 minutes here.
And I will share, and this has been a conversation we've been having with PDs, just so everyone is aware, when you dial 911, the phone call goes to law enforcement first, right? And then they will determine the call, what the call type is, and transfer it to fire if it's fire or medical traffic related. They might also dispatch law enforcement to it, but Director Bernstein's right, there's a missing piece that we have been unable to measure from how long does it take from when somebody talks to a law enforcement dispatcher to when it gets transferred over to fire dispatch. Yeah, some over at PSC, they say it's a matter of seconds on sometimes. We don't know. In Menlo Park, if somebody calls, it's going to Menlo PD dispatch first,
Right.
not always the county. And they have to transfer it.
Same thing now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can I get a point of clarification on this? Those two are not correlated. The one on the right is just PSAP 90th percentile. It does not correlate to the actual response times. Those are independent of each other. We're just trying to find what the PSAP 90 percentile. So at 90% of the time, PSAP is at a minute 31.
So that minute and 31 has no relationship to the
No
726?
No.
No. Okay.
But you have to add some increment onto the 7, and
Yes.
that's not a bad estimate of it.
So the 726 includes, for all those calls that we did, had a PSAP time attached to it. From the time we received the call, or dispatch received the call, us to get showing up on scene.
But that's not the definition of response time. And let me just say, we can't just willy-nilly throw out 7 minutes because that we're contractually obligated to arrive within 7 minutes in terms of the, in terms of our documents that we've got here. And I remember the meeting with Long, and it was actually a very heated meeting because he got up and patting himself back for meeting the standards and stuff. And when it was pointed out that they weren't meeting the standards, it was pointed out.
Okay.
It was the last time we ever got a report on standards, literally.
Got it.
From then on, it's been like 4 years, we haven't had a report, because it was obvious we weren't meeting the standards. And the county is obligated to be checking on us, and we're obligated to be checking on the county, and neither of those things are happening, and there are fines built into the agreement that we have for not meeting the standards. So it's not something like, well, the board can just decide to have a different standard. We can't do that without some kind of contractual impact.
Sure. Now, I will share, because we'll talk a little bit later on when we get into the ALS JPA and what the requirements are there. The contractual standard that Director Bernstein is talking about is the 6 minute and 59-second standard that applies to our first responder. Is it first responder unit on these? Is that what the FRU is?
FRU
Right.
definitions.
What's it stand for? FRU?
Yeah, the first responder unit.
Okay. We, interestingly enough, in the JPA document and that agreement that we have with AMR, the 659 excludes dispatch time. It's just travel time and turnout time.
I don't believe that's true. If you read the definitions, they're in the exact same document.
Well, I'll point it out to you when we get there, and you'll see, okay, because I don't know why it's that way, but that's the way. And we do currently meet it. We're at 6:57, whatever. That said, it doesn't include dispatch time, and we're compliant with the contract. But yes.
Help me out here, because I'm a little lost here at this point in time. So explain to me, as you take it along the wall, the first step to the last step.
Sure.
in the process.
Yeah, and it is,
Soon phone
it's,
call in.
it's interesting. that
Can you
asked
repeat
that.
the question? I couldn't hear what you
Yeah, he
said.
is asking about the first step, the last step in the process. And if you go to page 36 in your packet, yeah. This will actually take you for all those steps, so, and I'll just take you through that. From you suffer, or your partner suffers a cardiac event, you dial 911, that's the emergency call. The emergency call initially, if we're in Menlo Park, it's going to go to Menlo PD, right? If you're, I don't know if East Palo Alto is still being dispatched by county or not. If you're in East Palo Alto, it goes to the county Public Safety Communications Center. It will be answered on the sheriff's side, the law enforcement side.
Right.
They're going to be like, 911, what's your emergency? I don't know, my husband is not doing it. Okay, then what they do is they will transfer the call, let's stay on the line still, but they'll transfer the call over to fire dispatch. And, for Menlo PD, it's, whatever, 3 miles away. And at PSC for county sheriff, it's just right across the room. Fire dispatcher gets on the line, starts asking questions, and at the same time, they're determining an address and phone number. As soon as they have that information on a medical call, they're also dispatching our resources. Right? So and then they'll go through the EMD process, asking questions, trying to figure out if you know CPR, if that's an issue, things like that. They'll go through some question asking. In the meantime, the bell's going off at fire station. Let's say it's station 3. Station 6, we're in Menlo Park. Tones are going off, the bell goes off, and that starts the turnout time clock. Right? So we've already dealt with, from the time the fire dispatcher picked it up to the time he or she pushed the button and sent off the tones, that's the dispatch time.
And that's the minute and 31
Yeah,
seconds.
that's the one at 90th percentile. So we'll get on it. When the bell goes off in the station, our turnout time clock starts, and that's the amount of time it takes us to whatever, get out of bed, get off the treadmill, whatever, stop cooking, get down the stairs, look at the screens, the wall map, figure out on medical call, don appropriate personal protective equipment, get on the engine, and then push en route. Right? And then when you push en route, that stops the turnout time clock. And now the next component is the travel time. From the time you push en route to the time you arrive at the front door or in the driveway and you push on scene, that gives you your travel time.
So
That's when the clock stops. Does that mean, and again, for full transparency, does that mean we're at the patient's side? We have to go in the front door, upstairs, and the houses are big, it could take us another minute or two. It could be an apartment complex and we have to take an elevator, or it could be somebody laying on their front lawn. So, there's nuances in what you measure. But that takes you through all of those steps there. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the process
Mhm.
is clear now. So the 7 minute is that arrival on the site.
Yeah, 7 minutes, the way the board approved it, is from when that emergency call gets to fire dispatch. And the part Director Bernstein's talking about that's not being measured is the amount of time it takes for law enforcement dispatch to send it to fire dispatch. Right?
And that's the call process.
It could be county sheriff sending it to the other side of the room, it could be Menlo PD doing it over the phone. It could be seconds, it could be a minute, we don't know.
Do you know if Menlo PD and Atherton, because I know Atherton, when you dial when you go to Atherton PD as well, is that a phone, do they make a phone call or is that an electronic transfer just like it is at PSC?
Does anyone know the answer to
I
that?
think it's a phone call.
It's a phone call.
They don't have cab integration.
So they actually have to pick up the phone
Call.
and call PSC and then transfer the call, I guess?
They just start talking to that dispatcher and they'll transfer the call.
Yeah.
Am I,
In the unincorporated areas. So Even though it goes to the Menlo PD, if you need to share it, they have to
Yeah.
do it all.
No, I think
Yeah, and part of our experience is that it can also be an intercom kind of thing, like that's what we had down south where PD, whether it was CHP or whoever, had intercom lines just that went directly over.
So, Mark,
Yes.
I'm looking at this chart, the flow chart thing here about the whole process. So I'm looking at this fire dispatched part, and it turns from blue to red. So it says Menlo Park Fire receives dispatch request from 911, right? Is that when the 7 minutes and 26 seconds starts?
No,
Or is it
the
this- or is it the
726,
Or is it the red dot that says automatic alarm goes off in firehouse?
yeah, what I want to say, that the differentiation there when it goes from blue to red,
Yeah,
the red we have control over,
okay,
right? That's
Okay.
us. We have control over how quick we get out of the station and how fast we get to the call.
okay.
Prior to that, that is others. And it's not necessarily, because it could be law enforcement, part of it's fire dispatch.
But when is the 7 minutes and 26 seconds, this
Yeah,
red
the
dot?
726, and I suppose because we don't want to necessarily confuse the public, but it would be starting at the call processing line.
Oh,
Let's
so
just assume
that's out of our control.
it's over at PSC, Public Safety Communications.
Okay.
But I think the issue isn't that it's out of our control, it's that it's not measured.
That
Well, but
one
it's
there,
out of our control.
there are two different things. One, the law enforcement part is not.
That's what I'm saying.
The
Right,
part that's out of our control and is measured is
okay.
county
PSC.
communications.
Yeah, which is around here.
Right.
This is that red blue.
Yeah. No, I know.
Yeah,
So,
okay, that's good.
So-
clarification.
I have a few questions.
Yes, ask away.
What's the survival rate?
That would be
When
something
the
I'd have to
unit
get into.
goes and does CPR or cardiac arrest?
I know
What's
in
the
the United
survival rate?
States, in the United States as a whole,
No, here.
it's low. Here,
County.
I'd have to run some data. I don't have that for you, I'd have to run some data.
I've been told it's 65%.
Really?
Yeah, through the JPA. And I've never really gotten that, support documentation on that.
That number
So how did
sounds
they,
high. Yeah.
how did it come up with that number?
In one
But that was
of
the
the,
number that was provided us.
in one of the articles that we received, it said that for heart attacks, the survival rate is less than 10%.
65%.
Well, the way the heart attacks work on coronary cases is if there's a complete cardiac arrest, for every 1 minute that they do not get a defib on them, the survival rate goes down 10% for every minute. So if we're at 7 minutes on just our part of the response time, the likelihood of surviving is less than 30% already.
So the 65%.
And that doesn't count the amount of time it took the person to realize something's wrong, make the phone call, do all that stuff. So it's, my guess is it's probably, survival rate of a cardiac arrest is probably under 10%, well under 10%.
Well under 10, you think, Gary?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's something I can run data on. And
yeah. I'm just talking national
yeah,
statistics.
no, 65% doesn't.
65% is not the national
That's the-
statistic.
And
Maybe you're referring to witness cardiac arrest, when you see somebody go down?
If they have immediate
You
CPR,
start CPR. Maybe that's.
but even that's not, that's too
Can you
high.
continue, Robert? Where
Because the defib comes in.
You have another question?
I just want to follow up with a few. So specifically, what we can find out where it says emergency call and call processing, that's each call is kind of unique, relative to how long it takes. So if someone calls into 911 and they're on Highway 101, it's going to go to, the higher patrol? And then the higher patrol asks, well, where are you? And they say, well, I don't know. So from that,
from the emergency call to the call processing, that could be lines busy. You know, you dial 911, the line's busy. I've had that happen before to me. So it's kind of frustrating, you know. I've been on this board since 2011, and, you know, I was from an agency that did the entirety, from dispatch, you know, receiving the call, dispatch, and then putting the calls out for service with an arrival time and, you know, all that type of stuff. So I wasn't part of this agreement when it came out. I wasn't on the board at the time, and I would have been against it because we really don't have control of what would you say, 25% of what comes in to their complaint center or their dispatch center? Would that be a reasonable percentage? That each call that would be coming in would either be textbook, where, oh, you know, no downtime, or to an actual call for service, and you get the highway patrol, and then it goes to Menlo Park, oh no, you're in Atherton, or something like that. So, is there a way that we can do some type of a staff study and take maybe 10 calls that are received by the county center and just do a critique on those calls? You know, to get a sampling of all those different types of calls. You know, the really textbook ones that come in and they're handled, you know, no issues or anything, and or those 911 highway patrol calls that go to Vallejo and then they go to, you know, maybe Menlo Park or county communication. Oh no, that's Menlo Park or whatever. Is there a way that we can get that, Chief?
Maybe, I hear what you're saying. You're like, pick 10 calls and follow them
Let's see
from
what happens.
Menlo Park PD, because they'll have the time to pick up to see when it actually, we might be able to do that. We can give it a try. We have, every year we have joint meetings with our law enforcement chiefs. And that was one of the ones at the meeting before the last one where we were chatting with them. They think their transfer times are close to 2 seconds. We don't know, right?
I've experienced.
But I think it would be prudent for us to go, like I said, let's take a sample. I'll see if
Just a
that's-
few, you know, maybe, it doesn't have to be 100 calls, you know, just, you know, maybe,
We can pick 10 calls, and they can be a combination of medical, fire, who knows, and, yeah, volunteer. We'll pick one of our PDs and also a county thing
That'd be
and
great.
see. And maybe that will give us at least an idea of what we're missing in the kind of continuum of the time. But you're right, it's at least 25% of our total time from when somebody dials to when we get there. That's
yeah,
in that
that's a lot of
dispatch,
time.
fire, and well, police and fire dispatch.
So, you know, I'm just, what do you think,
Yeah.
Chiefs?
I know it's gonna be Aaron's job, so.
Yeah, Aaron, do you have any ideas?
Well, it just would be interesting, we can dig in, and, but let us give it a try. And we'll get back to you, yeah.
And if you need, you know, if you need us to maybe make a few calls to say that we want the information, you know.
So I'm gonna, more questions, or I'm gonna talk a little bit about NFPA standards? Sure.
Thank you.
I can wait, but my whole thing with this, with all the response time stuff that, you know, we're looking at right now, this information mark, you know, with all of the traffic calming devices that are being put in place and the development that's supposed to be happening in the foreseeable future, I mean, I think it's going to be a squeeze for us too, more so than ever before. I mean, we looked at, and I brought this up at the last meeting, with the traffic calming devices, namely the speed tables on Middle Avenue, and that's the primary, even though it's a third tier primary response route, it's still a primary response route. And then just reading in the paper that Atherton is thinking about putting, I'm assuming it's buffered by lanes. Gary might know better than I do. But you know, all of these traffic calming devices is I think will impact our response time, especially on primary response routes. So I don't want us to be in a the fire district as to be in a situation where we're liable for all of these response times and not get anyone there when some of this traffic calming devices planning and all of that is out of our control. I mean, we need to be working better with the cities on those things.
I agree. There are a
And
lot
they
of
know that.
challenges ahead of us. Some of it is, look at the city of Menlo Park has a strong desire to make it really bike and pedestrian safe, and they put in a lot of, all traffic calming measures slow us down to some degree, and we're not big fans of slower responses. And then also, as we talk about all of the projects that are occurring that are going to bring in a lot of new households and add traffic to our streets, that's going to have negative impacts on our response times. You know, we have the SRI project, the USGS project, the potential 80 Willow Road project. Who knows
And
what
that's
happens
just
with the
Menlo
downtown parking. And you all witnessed it coming here today, except for Director Jones, who didn't have to, he finally had the benefit of not having to deal with the traffic on Willow or Marsh.
Well, I actually came through Bayport, it was
Yeah,
completely jammed,
it's
even
gridlock.
going past.
It is gridlock, and it's not going to be better. And it's just one of those things where, you know, you look at the response times that Aaron shared with you, where we're at 7:26
Yeah.
right now, 90% of the time, including our dispatch times. Yeah, that might be one of those things where, as an aspirational goal, we may say, that would really be great if we could maintain that, considering everything that's coming, right?
Well-
Because I don't know that, yeah, there may be very minor tweaks that we could do to somewhat improve our response times, but trying to not let them degrade any more than that, maybe an aspirational goal. I don't know. It's just one of those
Well,
things.
so,
Just to add to it,
Yeah.
Atherton's actually considering a reduction of El Camino from 3 lanes to 2 lanes
Yeah.
each way.
Mhm.
And so if you drive through Redwood City from kind of Woodside Road to Jefferson, you'll get an idea of El Camino Real with 2 lanes each way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so chances are it wouldn't just gridlock through Atherton, between Menlo Park and Atherton, it'd probably gridlock all of Menlo Park on El Camino if they were to reduce the number of lanes. And it's for the same reason as Menlo Park, it's bicycle, for bike lanes.
one, that's a primary emergency response route, which we've designated, so, I mean, I would like us, at least for me, as a Menlo Park liaison, to do a presentation of our primary response route, since probably the majority, like 4 out of the 5 council members are not even familiar with what we adopted back in, 2019, 2018, somewhere in that time frame. So I've talked to the mayor about that, and he's willing to have us go and do a presentation about what they are, what we adopted, and I told him that, we're gonna have this meeting tonight, and let's see what comes out of this. So maybe with their first November meeting.
It'd be great to share with them our concerns about, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's like, there's consequences with just having.
Chuck, there's a hand up in the night.
Yes.
I just want to do a check-in on our process. I'm getting a little, well, let's hear from Chuck and I'll speak later.
The travel time does not seem to be the big problem. I mean, we can talk about speed bumps and all that kind of stuff. The turnout time is the thing that's taking a long time, and it's because we're waking up people from a dead sleep to respond. And if we got rid of that and we got to 12-hour shifts, so people just got in the engines and took off, we could save lots of time. And that, to me, is what we should be focusing on, because it's entirely in our control.
And we can also dig into our numbers and see how the turnout time changes during the time of day.
The worst travel times we have, if you look, the worst response times we have are the ones in the middle of the night. They're not at 4 o'clock when, it's bad, a little bit bad then too, but mostly it's at night is the problem.
I don't know, I'm looking.
That's what the data shows.
When I look at these auto numbers, especially during rush hour traffic, that's a big deal.
But just for maybe an hour or so, if you look again, we have the report right here, and it shows the big problems are like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning.
Well, I know in East Palo Alto, starting at anywhere between 2 and 3 o'clock until about 7. And you probably saw it coming over here, in terms of the traffic. So I'm just saying, I hear what you're saying. In each city, I think it'll be a little bit different in how that get addressed. I think we're really going to look at some of the, areas that you talked about that could solve that problem. But I think it may be city by city, especially on the east side of 101. It seemed like that, according to the report, this is from, what's the agency that did this report?
Seagate.
Seagate. And they mentioned that on a couple pages about some of the issues in areas that the district really needs to look at. And so with that said, my question is, in terms of process question, I think a lot of information that's in the Seagate report, I sort of ask myself, what, who does this, why does this happen? And if you just take it back to even just from the policy 1.1, where it talked about there is no mandatory federal or state regulations directing the level of fire service response time and outcomes delivered by the district. And I kind of wonder what standards are we create these standards ourselves based on some what's going on in the area? How do you arrive at those numbers?
That's great. That's a perfect segue. It's like you teed it up for me to go right in and talk about the NFPA standards. And just so you know, this tracking license, we're on a good place for this. And, if the end result of this portion of the meeting is just that the board is better informed on how we measure things and the things that we have control over and has some ideas moving forward, that is fine for us. We don't have to have an answer by the end of this. But that takes us into the NFPA standard document that is included in your packet.
Hey, Chief, before you go there, can I ask a question?
Sure.
I'm confused by Director Bernstein's comment about travel time being the worst during the night, because I'm looking on page 14 of the report, page 47 of the packet, and it's showing green from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m.
That's for numbers of calls. Look at page 13.
for travel time analysis.
Yeah. This is the number of calls.
Well, again,
Okay.
Page 13.
It is, and sometimes the challenges with data is we could have some sort of outlier in there, that, the N or the number of calls that are being measured is low, and we could have one large number that skews it. I'm not sure. We do have at 3 a.m. on Thursdays, an average response travel time of 4 minutes and 16 seconds that is surrounded by a bunch of green in the twos. So I don't know what the underlying cause is, but we have a lot of quick response times in the middle of the night too.
On the
I think
NFPA,
that, a better question would be is, and we don't have it in here, is what's our turnout times look like, right? To Director Bernstein's thing is waking up from a dead sleep and getting going faster or slower than being in the shower and getting a call, or being in the middle of a training evolution and getting a call, or whatever. I'm not sure. There's a number of different things that affect that. But we can dig into the data and see if we can't figure out what the root causes are for some of our delays and if we can fix them. Back to the NFA report.
when you into the data that you would have to be right there at that point in time when if the truck is wrecked, that the person is asleep and maybe you can't get up. Unless you know that, how would you be able to analyze what data would you look at because it would just show a time, a start time and an end time.
Right, well, we can actually see when, from when the time the bell goes off in the station to the time they push it around. We can see how long it takes them to do that and see if there's any correlation between time of day and it taking longer. Right, and I think you can make an assumption that between 12 a.m. and 5 a.m., they're probably asleep. And does that make a difference? Does it make a difference as we look at a small station like Station 3 versus big station number 2? Does a big news station cause them more time? I don't know, but we can dig into this and figure out if there's some way we can engineer our way out of that and make our response times better. Are there any practices we can do a little Lean Six Sigma analysis on it and see if there's anything inefficient about the way they're going through their process, right? There are some things we can do.
I think you identified a pretty key idea there, which is just kind of double clicking on all these numbers and saying, how do they look on the time graph? So turnout time is an example. There could be a correlation to the dinner time or meal time, exercise time, but I think to me that's the low-hanging fruit here. It's less about what PSC is doing, because for us to impact what PSC is doing in that whole process, we're one fire district out of 15 or 20 cities and departments that they service. So we're not going to have the loudest voice to go change their processes. We can look at it, but I think a really thorough look at our own data and then asking a lot of these different questions of our own data and see what conclusions we draw. If we can make the part we do own more efficient, that's more likely to be successful. Making the part we don't own improve is probably going to take years. I'm not saying we shouldn't pursue it if we shouldn't expose the reality of what's going on there, but as far as actually making improvement, I think looking at our own data and doing a much more thorough analysis of the cause and effect of our results is probably the low-hanging fruit.
And we have to be really calculated in the way we go about trying to affect change. And I've heard anecdotal stories about in the past, leadership has said turnout times are really important, we want to improve them, so they get one guy to run down the engine and push in or out. And suddenly your turnout times are shorter, and now your travel times are longer, right? So overall response time doesn't change. So we need to figure out, the holistic thing, right? We want to overall improve the total, of the times we have control over, improve that by X if it's feasible.
I think it's less about changing behaviors than changing process.
Right.
Right, because if you're pushing them to change their behavior about turnout time, then you can get that unintended consequence of I'll just push the button sooner. One person's assigned to go push the button right away.
Yeah.
If you talk about what's the process improvements we can do about how we're doing things, those are things that you have less impact. It's same thing with travel time. You don't want to encourage faster travel time. So don't stop at red lights. Just blast through all the intersections. Don't drive with no caution at all. Would be a really poor idea. And so I think it's just a matter of looking at the data and then looking at the processes under them and say, are there process changes? Are there shift changes? Are there other things we could do? But I don't personally believe it's about behavioral change of our responders. I think their intent is, let's get there as soon as we can. That's their desire. They have a shared desire with the board and the public on that.
So a little bit into Director Jones's question, where do these standards come from? The most commonly referred to one is the NFPA 1710 standard. There is on pages 4 and 5 of your packet is a 2-pager attachment, a fact sheet from NFPA. I'll just refer to page 5. In advance, I will share that in theory, NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, is as they call it, the industry standard. It's not a requirement, but in theory, it's the standard against which you're measuring. Oftentimes, NFPA comes out with recommendations that are unattainable, or infeasible, or cost prohibitive. I'm sorry, this is my bias and personal background with it. NFPA is made up of some professional firefighters, labor groups, vendors, everybody who has their own personal interests in it. Yeah, the response time standards right now that NFPA is, you can see in that little box in the upper right-hand corner, the benchmarks that they have. I'm going to skip down to turnout times. Turnout times for fire and EMS are 80 seconds and 60 seconds. And they measure, NFPA measures these things at the 90th percentile. And Aaron's going to chat a little bit about percentiles, means, and medians, just so you have we all have a common understanding of what we're talking about. And the first due engine of 240 seconds, that's the 4 minutes that you see in there. I want you to understand how strongly that has been influenced by labor groups. And that's not our local labor groups, this is national labor groups that want these very tight standards. So there's more fire stations, more firefighters, and it's not necessarily based on science. This, you know, if it was science, it would be 4 minutes and 7 seconds. It wouldn't be 4 minutes. You look at all these even numbers here. You know, it is not, I don't want to say it's completely random, right? Because quicker is typically better in our profession. On a medical call, on fire to keep it from growing. But there's no scientific formula that's developed here that says that's the number we need to have. I have to be honest with you, sometimes it's better to not get there quite so quick on a fire, so the fire's already flashed before you get there, and it's less dangerous. But I will say on a medical call, you know, if somebody's not breathing, you know, hold your breath for 30 seconds, or a minute, or 2 minutes, and this is way too long. But it's also virtually cost prohibitive for us to have resources that are so close that we can get there, you know, in under 4 minutes, you know, comprehensively and stuff like that. So usually as organizations are developing their standards or their objectives, they'll look at these as kind of guidelines, and then they'll develop organizational objectives for response times based on, a lot of times it's budget, topography. Our district's a little bit easier than Woodside, right? That where you've got, you know, rural responses. You know, we're basically suburban here. You have urban standards where, you know, you have New York and San Francisco have firehouses much more closely than we do. But also understand that it's even interesting to have a rural response time standard saying that, you know, if you live in the suburban areas, it's okay, you need to get to a medical call within 7 minutes, but in the rural areas, 15 minutes is okay. No, it's not. You know, if you're not breathing, that's way worse. But again, it is, part of it goes back to, it's just, you know, it's governments trying to do the most good with the monies they have. And so you place fire stations where your risk is and where your population is, and then you try and make sure that people that choose to live out in rural areas understand that there's consequences to living. You don't have services, and you make that conscious choice when you choose to live up in the mountains, in peace and harmony, that if your house is on fire, it's going to be a long time before a fire engine gets there. Or if your partner's having a heart attack, yeah, you darn well better know CPR and have an AED. But that's just kind of an understanding. So NFPA generally has these standards out. You'll see that lots of consultants will refer to them. Lots of fire departments use it as kind of the beginning point for developing their standards. But, you know, I think for us to develop reasonable performance objectives, we should consider our budget, our traffic, or, you know, how many stations could we fit in? Is it worth it for us to improve our response times by 1 minute? To add another 2 stations, all those things. You know, are there things that we can do that are better? Or are the, you know, is the level of service that we give right now, and you can see kind of what our response times are around 726. is that within the realm of acceptable? And it's okay to deviate from the standards, but have a methodology for doing it, and an explanation as to why. And also, yeah, there are some other things that we already do, and Melanie will share about that. They're really, really progressive and helpful for our folks. Some of the stuff the board's already done with, approving us moving forward with the drone as a first responder project, right? Really innovative things that we're doing that improve the safety of the public and our first responders. So, a lot of things play into it. What I want to do now, so we don't run out of time, is I'm going to have Chief McDonald chat just a little bit. And there was attachment B was kind of a primer, I'll call it, to just bring the board up to speed on what we measure and how we measure it. And that,
Before we get up,
yes.
I want to check in with the board a minute. How do you feel about this process? Is there anything that we can, is the process moving fast enough, slow enough, or going in more detail enough for you? How do you feel about this point, this juncture? Yes, sir.
I have, for example, some questions that I would like to ask the chief, but it feels like we're moving, a little bit too quickly.
I can slow down. I'll tell you, because
Is
here's,
it relating to the subject matter
What was just talking
okay, so
I can slow it down, and even if it means that we don't get to the second subject, or we just touch on it partially, that's fine. I'd rather make sure all the board's questions are fully answered on this, so, yeah.
it's 7:05 right now, so
I think we're good.
Another half hour, maybe looking at this, or?
Well, yeah, we could spend another hour on this, but I think it would be great if the board has questions, let's ask them, and that's the intent, is for this to be an interactive process. So,
I just want something.
Sure.
Oh.
Great.
Well, you were talking about these NFPA things here. Do you have any idea why they think that the turnout for fire is longer than the turnout for EMS?
yes, because generally we have to don is the act of putting clothes on. We have to don more personal protective gear. For an EMS call, you can go in your station uniform, and you can just put on your EMS jacket and some gloves, right? So it's very quick. But you think about, if I go out to the engine like this and we have a fire, I'm stripping this stuff off down to my shorts and getting in my bunker here, so they give you some more time. Yeah, what's really interesting, this is just anecdotal information based on past observations, is even though they allow you more time for fire calls, usually the firefighters so want to go on fires, they get out the door quicker on a fire call than on the EMS. Right? It's just the human, because when they hear a fire, they're, let's go. When they have a medical call, it's like, okay, yeah. It's just, human behavior.
Within travel time, is the data available to us? I'm not saying we report on it, but is it available to us to look at call by call, route by route? Call by call and route by route?
We'd have to go to PSC to find each route for every call.
No. I'm talking about the driving route.
Yeah, the driver route, PSC tracks that. They have the ability to track that, but we have to go to PSC.
Okay.
You want to see the actual street line, like which way did they go to get the call?
Yeah, I think if
That's interesting.
you take what I said earlier about kind of double clicking on the data,
Mhm.
I think to really answer the question of would a new station as an example help, you have to kind of look at the travel routes and say which calls are actually the primary calls that are causing the degradation of travel time. Because we may find a hotspot that says, this certain route that a particular engine or two engines or three engines have to take all the time are the slow routes. And if you look at that on a call analysis, you theoretically could create a heat map that says these are our bad travel areas, and those would be candidates for potentially other stations. But until you look at the data, you just don't know. If it's just evenly distributed and it's the lottery every time they get a call as to where the backup's going to be, then that will show in the data as well, because there won't be any hotspots.
Well, it's interesting, I was chatting with Aaron about this, I don't remember if it was today or yesterday, well, it must have been today, about digging in, you know, we don't currently dig into all of the data station by station, and so it's possible that we might have an underperforming station in this data that's hidden by
That's-
really high-performing stations, right? Kind of like what
That's
you're
kind
talking
of
about.
what I'm getting to.
And he was talking about doing that in future reports,
Yeah, and it may not be, I mean, it may not be an underperformance of the crew at the station. I think it's really important when you look at this data to make sure we have clarity as to what we're looking for. It could be that a particular station is in a location that just makes it very difficult for them to get to
Like Station
major
5.
parts of their district. Station
Station
5 would
Yeah.
probably be, I suspect, be one.
right?
Just, yeah, it's in a neighborhood, it's, yeah, got Middlefield that's backed up, it's got Marsh Road that's backed up, it's got the freeway that's backed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all that whole area is just highly congested. So that's, I just want to make sure that I think it's important that as we look at the data, I think we need to look at the data more thoroughly, that we don't get kind of a labor response from it that says, you know, we're trying to find fault with the employees. We're trying to find faults with the process and things that are actually changeable in the process or changeable by more stations or, you know, changeable by having a separate EMS unit in certain areas. We have a big concentration of EMS calls in one area. Maybe we need an EMS unit in that area. But that's all they do is EMS calls. So and these are just all random ideas, but the data should point us to some of these things as, you know, validate whether they're real ideas or harebrained ideas.
So is that something we can just put on the wall, say, okay, mark it off, one of the things we're gonna get to? So,
Yeah, I want to second what Gary was just saying. The last time we got a full report on this was Don Long's report, and back then they reported each station separately. All the components that we're talking about were reported separately, and what it showed is out of the 7 stations, 4 of them were below the target that we had, but 3 of them were above it. And I think the data can show that, and some of it was a more serious problem and so forth, which we could address.
Well, actually, the report some of the things that were in that report have actually been addressed. Putting a battalion chief on each side of the fire of the freeway, putting a trucking company on each side of the freeway. So there's actually been changes to improve the response time as a result of it. But I think it takes a real thorough look at the data to come up with those conclusions.
Well, the two things that I got out of this was one, you know, to do the sampling twice because of the differences for people calling in, you know, that we're going to try to address that. And the second thing is, kind of what Gary mentioned, is the location of the actual engine, that when they receive the call, maybe they're backing up, you know, maybe they're at a station 1 and they're backing up someone in station 3 for a call for service. So that the location of those response times would be important also, because the engine is, you know, we can't think of the engine all the time in the firehouse, right? You know, they're doing another, or they're leaving a call and going to another call. So that's another thing that, you know, maybe get that type of data. And if they go from call to call, call to call, well, they're not going to be leaving at a station 1 or station 2. They're going to be leaving wherever that location of that last call was, or they're at station 77 filling up with gas. I mean, you know, just small things like that would definitely affect our response times if they're not really at the station per se. So, thank you.
Oh, you any more questions for me? Because if not, I'm going to send it over to Chief McDonald to chat a little bit about just how we measure things. Aaron is the producer along with our Fire Stats LLC that does our fire analysis.
So the chief had asked me to talk to you about mean, median, and percentile. He put a nice little attachment together for you guys, and it was pretty well. In general, mean, or what I like to think of it as average, is just taking a group of data, add them all together, then just divide by the total number of data sets. So if you even go to page 8, it has a very simple description of how that works. And this description shows perfectly why averages tend to be not very well used in the fire service, because you can have outliers that definitely skew what you're looking at. And then if you look at this example, it's talking about just income at a business. And in this, it only has 7 income levels. The last one is $1 million income. When you take the average income of that business, it looks like it's $182,000, which totally skews what people are generally making in that business. The other way to look at data would be the median. Just take all the data points and just go to the middle number. If you have 10 data points, it's usually the number that sits at 5.5, right there in the middle. In this little simple example that she put together, the median gives a better representation of what people make there, and it's $50,000. It's right there in the middle figure. What the fire service moved to after following kind of like emergency medicine, airplane pilots, and other industries, they went to percentile. The percentile gives a better representation of what the numbers are. We currently in the fire service use the 90th percentile, which says that 90% of the time we are going to respond in this amount of time. We moved away, we don't use low numbers like 80%, we'll go to super high numbers like 95 or 99. 80 would underserve people because some of those numbers would show that we're really making it very quick. If you move up the scale percentile, it'll show that we're underperforming and we'll need a lot more resources. So percentiles, what they do is it gets out some of those higher numbers and gives you a good general prediction of how we're responding. Those are pretty simple things, unless you have questions on it. So the fire service in general is using percentiles, it's a little more accurate for the people that we could serve. It was a very simple thing.
I wanted to ask about the numbers where we throw out number because we don't like it somehow. We think, oh, it must be a bad number, and back it goes and that. What kind of control is there on that?
So when I talk to our statistician who presents these things, he starts throwing out numbers like when you talk about PSAP time of 0. He goes, oh, how do you have a PSAP time of 0? Right? No one called the emergency, no one picked up the phone, but those are some of the numbers. He generally thinks that that's not a number to come out. So he'll start getting rid of those. PSAP numbers that are super high, he'll say like, well, did someone not answer the phone? What really happened? Because you got there really quickly. Is that what you asked?
Well, but for example, I think if you have 0, it's not possible. It's not feasible.
Mm-hmm.
But if you got a high number, I know people who say, gosh, I called 911 and it was 2 minutes before anybody answered.
Right.
It's feasible. It may be not accurate, but it was feasible. And so in a way, you're skewing the data by throwing out that one and not the infeasible ones.
Right, and you bring up a good point, is that the PSAP time that we are getting is what PSC is contacting. We're missing a whole other point where maybe you call and Highway Patrol's taking it up, but you're on hold for a while, or the call hangs up, and there's a recall back. We've had instances where people say, hey, I called 10 minutes ago, what took so long? It's because the processing that we're not in control of took a while for us to get to it. And there's plenty of times where we respond to calls where I just got off the phone, how did you guys get here so quick? Right? It all depends on that PSAP time. When it actually starts, which we have no control over, gives what the people would perceive of what we're doing.
Well, we do have control. It's one of the things that I'd like to investigate. We have control because we don't have to deal with those people. We have the possibility of going around them or replacing them or having something different happen. And I think at some point when they're not reliable, then that's something we should take a hard look at.
So I know in our county, they've moved to triangulating cell phone calls. So in our county, you're generally not going to be getting, if you call from here, CHP back there, you'll probably get triangulated over to Menlo Park PD, or if you're in East Palo Alto, it'll go directly to PSC. So we've done some pretty good things in this county. Can't say that if you're on 880 going north, and you call in a call, you're not going to end up to CHP in Vallejo, who's going to ask you where you're at. We've corrected those issues in this county, so we are getting better in this county now.
Yeah, but I wonder, for example, why couldn't we have a telephone thing where you dial 911 and they say, if you want the police, push 1. If you want fire, push 2. Because most people know the difference between a crime and a fire.
So in PSC, when it goes to PSC, that is the question they ask. So is this police or fire? And as soon as they say fire or medical, goes to the medical side. And if they ask it's medical, it's a pretty quick dispatch to us. Then they go through their EMD process, asking what's going on. And then they'll give us details and out. So we get launched pretty quick when it comes to a medical call. Fire calls are a little different because they have to justify and find out it's a true location, they pull up a map, and then the actual computer CAD figures out what apparatus needs to go to. So there's a little bit longer than that.
Why would we not have to know location for medical calls?
Because we can start generally going as they ask. Say it comes in out at 675 Bay Road, right? But they're just looking across the, they're standing in front of 673. So as they go, they can start asking, hey, what is your actual location? We start pinging it. Oh, it's actually in front of 673.
It seems to me it's worth looking at dispatch as a function because I think it's very inefficient right now. And you hear anecdotally, not scientifically, but anecdotally, you hear people all the time saying, you wouldn't believe how long I stayed on 911 and so forth.
Yeah, I don't know if that's happening in this county. I know it happens outside of this county, but this county, I'm not sure if that's...
Like, I think the other thing you have to be careful of is the perception of time. Because when people are under stress, a 30-second call with PSC, they'll say I was on the phone for 3 minutes, and they'll also say it took 10 minutes for the fire engine to get there. And if you look at that same call, you'll find out they spent 20 seconds with PSC and the engine got there in 4 minutes. It felt like 10 minutes.
Yeah, I've not used 911 in this county, but I have driving on the freeway. Like I was driving through Oakland, I see a fire off the road, I call. It took several minutes because one it's CHP, then they had to process where you're calling from, where you think you're at, what can we send you to this dispatch, and it did take a while to actually report it.
Are you done?
Yeah, it was,
All right, so my battery was dying, so that's why I moved.
I thought you moved there because you had a presentation with all the changes you're going to make.
No, I did, it's interesting, I just, what I'd really like to do is make sure,
Derek, make a suggestion to you,
You have to look at yourself.
what, make a suggestion?
Yeah, we're gonna have a break.
Yeah, you want to do it right now?
Yeah, because I think I can't see everybody, and I have a problem not seeing folks for whatever reason. So we can shift these chairs, tables,
We can do whatever you want.
now we can put your laptop here.
I have to plug in, which is why I'm up here, but yes, you guys all are going to have to stare at me up here so the computer.
We'll still be in Michelle's fire.
Well, maybe if we could put them in a V or something, we could sort of look across.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, just a
Why don't we- You want to take a 5-minute break and people can use the restroom and get some more food or dessert? And we will coordinate with Michelle, good positioning for the table, so she's still got it all on camera. Does that work?
Works for me.
Ready for me? Yeah.
I put the table moved, I got a little nervous.
Yeah, we,
This is better.
yeah, since we have talked a little bit about just how we measure, I'm going to have a brief conversation about fire response analysis report so that now that we've talked a little bit about, we have a couple of things displayed on here. This happens to be the call processing time. This is the one we don't have control over. It's PSC's numbers. That said, on this chart, you have a histogram here. Right? The beauty of this chart is not only does it show you the average, the NFPA recommended time in the 90th percentile, but it shows you the stratification of all the data there. And you can see that, as Aaron was talking about, the 90th percentile is, if you have 100 data points, wherever the 90th one is, that's the 90th percentile. you know, and so everything on the right side of it, and I don't want to call them all outliers, but basically the concept is when you measure at the 90th percentile, it lets you focus on the overwhelming majority of what you do, and also understanding that there are going to be some outliers. None of it is data that we specifically pick out and throw away, but we say, we're going to focus on this, because there's always going to be nuances. Not with, with call processing time, there may be a language barrier. There may be a telephone connection challenge. There may be a variety of different things that causes data to be out there, You see the far out one there at 3 minutes with 6 calls out of thousands of calls, probably 8,000 calls. 6 calls were out there, and there's always reasons behind it, but the 90th percentile lets us focus on the meat of our business. It's everything to the left. And then the other thing too, which is always interesting, is remember the 90th percentile is a single data point. What you don't get to see by knowing the 90th percentile is a minute and 42 seconds is look at, on that screen there, just the first 3 columns, 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 20 seconds, and you've got probably over half of your calls are processed that quickly. So you look at PSC can really get calls out very quickly. Most of these are in all likelihood medical calls where they can dispatch them with very little information other than verified telephone and address, and out they go. Understand mixed in here, because this is all calls. There's fire calls, there's traffic accidents, there are things where they are trying to figure out an exact location, and so. But what you can see is kind of that stratification there. So I just, and again, this is not just a fire industry standard, but it's basically an industry standard to often measure at the 90th percentile. We also, for informational purposes, will show the averages. We'll show the average, which is 42 seconds. You can see the NFPA standard for dispatchers, or for dispatching centers, is a minute and 30 seconds 90% of the time. So they're not meeting the NFPA standard, but again, sometimes those standards are developed without all of the information. I don't know how it works for dispatching, but I know on travel response times it can be a little bit different.
Chief, is there any way to find out what the difference is between, like, those first 2 or 3 columns over there and everything else? Is there some way to observe or to have some consultant look at that?
You want to know why those are so quick?
Yeah. What makes them quick and others are so slow?
It might be possible. I don't know if Aaron can break out this data based on call type. Yeah, right, because it'd be interesting to see for EMS calls where they, and it might be for a traffic accident or structure fire or something else. It could take longer, but that might be helpful to kind of dig into some of the data like that.
So you know from the county what type of call each one of these is?
I know from what our company officers write in the reports of what the call is.
But how would you know, like the first column there, the 2,800 or whatever, how would you know? How would you know what those 2,800 calls are? Are they labeled somehow, or?
So when you pull the data out of our system, it'll give you an incident number, a date, and all the timestamps. So if it's a PSAP of 10 seconds, I can look at all of those that are PSAP within 10 seconds, and then you can see what type of calls we're running.
I think that would really be helpful, because we're guessing what kind of call it is, but we have no clue.
Dependent on the company officer correctly categorizing it, but my guess is 95% of the time or better it will be accurate. So.
But he said it's based on what the fire leadership wrote down, and they do know.
That's what the captain does. Well, they fill out an incident report afterwards, and it's all in the system that Aaron's getting the data from, so we can do that.
Well, I'm saying that because I think a solution to any of these problems could be based on what kind of a call it was. Maybe not, but if they were in fact medical, then there's something we could do to somehow segregate the medical calls.
Right. This is the, sorry, I just went a little far, because the title's here. Just talk about this one. You know, in our report that we provide the board monthly, I try and include in the base part of the report the information that's really important to us, and then we have an appendix with a variety of other data points that we're looking at. This one is the one that we were talking about a little bit earlier about what we are contractually obligated to with the ALS-JPA. We are, and as we get into Melanie's area, we'll start talking about, we have kind of this obligation contractually to stop the clock for the system. Now, AMR pays the ALS-JPA monies for us to stop the clock. That means they don't need to have as many units. And we have paramedics that get there and they can provide advanced life support. So again, what's being displayed here is, this is a histogram for our, I'm going to say, what do we call it? Anyway, this is response time, including only turnout time and travel time. That's all that we get measured. Did you want to call for public comment?
Because you know someone's in here, they're going to use the bathroom. So, I mean, we can stop them from coming in.
I thought they needed the code.
Oh, probably for outside, that's fine. But again here, it's just, again, this is turnout time and travel time. We're measuring this because that's the standard we're held to comply with the contract. And again, you can see the requirement for our contract is 6 minutes and 59 seconds. And our 90th percentile performance is 6 minutes and 52 seconds. So we comply. Not every fire agency in the county is always compliant. We talk about this usually at our county chiefs meeting. There's some challenges up in the northern portion of our county in some of the areas for them to get there. But for us, we're pretty consistently under that mark there. And then again,
Chief, do we know when a call is handled by a mutual aid agency for us?
In this, I know. I'm going to ask Aaron if we can tell. Is this Menlo only resources in here?
Yeah.
Okay. So if Redwood City responds into our area, that is not.
Yeah, in this data we're not counting.
Okay. Did that answer your question, Dr.?
Well, I'd like to know if there's a difference or something. I mean, at some point, it would be nice to know.
That's probably some data we could get, is to also see what the performance is on mutual aid responses or automatic aid responses into our district. Right, so we can measure and make sure that when others are responding for us, that maybe it's, I don't know if it meets our standard, but it'd be interesting to see, right? And usually they're doing that because they've been determined to be a closer resource, right? So in theory, they can get there quicker than any of our Menlo resources can, even though it's a call for one of our constituents.
Or we've exhausted all our resources.
That's possible too, yeah.
So this would include us doing auto-aided, like North Fair Oaks or Redwood City, if we're responding,
Menlo call, yeah.
as long as we're responding.
Would this be into Redwood City's jurisdiction?
Redwood City, Woodside.
Okay.
Yeah.
So all
Any call
responses.
for
So anytime we
Okay.
respond.
Got it.
Chief, could I just ask you a question about
Please
this
do,
response time? I'm looking at the contract for the ambulance company, not the one for us as a first responder.
Mhm.
And I'm looking for AMR, yeah. And this, it's the fat one. And I don't even have a page number, but at the very back of the thing, they have maybe 10 pages of definitions. And one of them says response time. And their definition of response time, it says the actual elapsed time between receipt by the contractor, that would be the ambulance company, of a call that an ambulance is needed and the arrival of the ambulance at the requested location.
Okay.
I would guess that that same definition would hold when we're dispatched as well, but maybe not.
Well, it's interesting, yeah, I don't know, you know, I understand that definition, that is from, well, it's interesting. It's very similar to how it's applied in this graph here, from the time the ambulance company receives the call. So that excludes dispatch time.
But that's
Right.
not what it says. This is when, I see, of a call that is needed.
Mhm.
But when you go on and look at the other things, they have to verify the address, they have to do a
Right.
priority, there's a
Well, I
bunch of
think
other
that-
rigmarole.
Yeah, the ambulance company is saying, I've got a contract with you county. However long it takes for your dispatchers to tell me I'm going on a call is your business. I don't have control over that. You're paying me for the things I have control over. And that's from when you tell me I have a call to when I get to it. And I'm agreeing to do it in 12 minutes and 59 seconds, 90% of the time.
That's the same thing we're measuring here for us.
We're doing the same thing, except we do it in 6:59.
Yeah,
That's why they.
But we don't have dispatch, we don't have call processing time in this.
Yeah, it's the same thing, right, so, and that's great that you actually found that definition, that explains why it's excluded in this measurement here, and like if I was the private ambulance company, I'd be like, no, you can measure my performance, your own performance is not something you're paying me to take care of.
Does the call to the ambulance go through the same kind of circuitous route that our call does?
They get dispatched on a different frequency than us, and I believe by a different dispatcher, or are they dispatching themselves? Their own? So, but yes, it's the same stuff, law, you know. The 911 call comes in the same way.
Why is it-
AMR dispatches their own resources.
Why is it a different dispatcher?
It's just, they have somebody to dispatch fire and somebody to dispatch the ambulance, just out of, volume of calls.
But if a call comes in, they don't know who it's going to, how do they know who answers the phone? How do they get it to the right dispatcher?
I'm not 100% sure about that. I'm assuming they're going to direct the call.
They're right next to each other.
Yeah.
And the fire dispatchers are the highest level of dispatcher, meaning you need the most training because it's the most dynamic. But they're usually paired up. They're right next to them. It's like, okay, you dispatch the ambulance at the same time I'm dispatching fire, because they may be handling 4 different fire incidents simultaneously, and they could hand off the medical department to a fire dispatch almost at the same time.
It shows up on, usually most dispatch centers, I haven't spent time in ours, it's an electronic transfer. So even if you're sitting next to each other, you don't actually talk to each other, you're hitting a button that says, that one needs an ambulance, and it pops up on the ambulance dispatcher screen. It's an electronic process. Like I said, I haven't done it here, I've done it over in Oakland, and you basically sit there, and I was dispatching medical, and nobody talks to anybody. Everything's just electronic, pops up in your queue, and then you process it.
Well, it just seems like you can't sit next to more than one person or 2 people and, what?
Have you ever been to dispatch?
I've been there, yeah, but I've not watched it, I've not watched it happen.
Part of our training
The
is
new
sit
one.
with- and they really, there's lights that tell you what kind of call they're on. You can sit with the call takers taking 911 calls. You can sit with the fire dispatchers, or you can sit with the police dispatchers. And the EMS is right next to the fire because they're on the same calls.
I see, okay.
But they also do BLS transports to their site.
Because we're really primarily talking about performance standards or response metrics, I kind of skipped over just the call volume stuff and the type of calls, because it's not really relevant to the conversations. But I will share just some of the other things that we happen to look at that are in the appendix. Is we tend to look at the monthly numbers too, because that will allow us to see if there's any anomalies in there, if there's, so we can just kind of carve out the last month and see if anything seems out of alignment. So it allows us to act on it. Again, the monthly numbers for turnout times, just by month. We look at, and the turnout times are not in the primary body of that, but it's in the appendix too. But we can monitor our turnout times, and We can see the NFPA standard on turnout times is 1710, says it should be a minute 20, which is the 80 seconds for fires. And you can see at our 90th percentile, we're at 243, so it's not great. And it's pretty consistent between the month of September and the last 12 months. 245 to 243 at the 90th percentile, so. And the travel times. Again, it's the interesting thing when you measure at the 90th percentile is you can see, again, the value of this chart here is it just shows where the, the predominant numbers are. We get the calls, if you look at the average time, we get the calls on average pretty quickly. At the 90th percentile though, it's, it's a little bit slower, but you can see the overwhelming majority of the calls are handled, or I should say, we travel to them pretty quickly. I don't know that there's, kind of want to get it back to more of the conversation about some next steps, so. Was that?
I have a question.
Oh, sure.
I'm still looking at the report. Is item number 1.2.
Are you looking at the standards of coverage? Or will you give me a page number on the?
Page 15.
Okay.
15.
15.
Still standards of cover report, yes.
Still on the first page.
1.2?
Yeah, it stated that the district deployment system meets the district current demand, but is becoming strained. So I wanted to hold that in that for a minute, especially east of Highway 101. And needs adjustment soon moving forward as growth occurs. Traffic congestion is also an increasing problem as the communities the district protects continue to evolve. How is the deployment system being strained? Is my question. And what currently is the district doing at this point to resolve this particular situation?
So, back in 2015 or 16, when this was drafted, the recommendation, it was acknowledging that we were having challenges down on this end, and the recommendation was to add additional staff in here to help deal with that, which the board did with a battalion chief and with a ladder truck. So that addressed it in part, the call volumes. And so that, that same strain that they were documenting in here and acknowledging was addressed by the board by the actions of adding additional staff. So,
You need the letter
in what?
the letter you mentioned about a Quint and.
Yeah, and we added, it was a Quint, and now it's an aerial ladder truck and an additional battalion chief. So we basically have the ability to respond to fires in our district with our resources. So it's been addressed pretty well. We could always add more resources that would, improve our services to a degree.
It was also
And then-
moved from Station 1 to Station 2, right?
What's that?
It was also moved from Station 1 to Station 2
Yeah.
of the battalion chief and the ladder
And
truck.
where was the BC originally when we just had one?
Station
At
one.
one.
Yeah.
We also had a squad at some point, I think it was
Yeah.
right after that.
Yeah.
So we have added some additional staffing, and then I will always say, my cautionary tale, and I know that anyone who ever hired a consultant, the consultant comes in and asks you what's your objective, and they'll usually write a report to help you attain your objective.
It also
Was that too transparent?
That's true.
We also mentioned about Station 77 in terms of, we made a strong recommendation and request to, I know we're still trying to do some things over there at 77, but it really talked about expanding 77 to allow for this additional crew to kind of be station to kind of help with some of the
Yeah.
things.
And we're having a conversation right now, as we relocate the crews out of Station 1 when we do the rebuild of placing the squad back down at 77 to see, because Chief McDonald was saying that's, probably where the majority of our call volume is there and where the help can be most. So we may add, probably that's in a year and a half-ish, put the squad down there and see if it has any impacts. But we're going to do that with internal staffing rather than additional staffing initially. Director Bernstein?
I wanted to ask about the nature of the calls that we're getting. One of the articles that we were sent talked about a place in the Connecticut maybe where they have an ambulance that has a social worker on it, and it's say $5 million a year and so forth, which seems like a lot, but they were talking about people who are making repetitive calls to the fire department, but not really having a real need for them. They just need someone to talk to or something. Is that a problem for us? Do we have callers who are kind of just pests and need attention?
Oh, sure, and I'll let Melanie address that to a degree. Yeah, she says she's smiling, because Melanie served as a paramedic here in San Mateo County, so she's got a lot of experience and background in that.
Yeah, and truly, I think that frequent callers like that, it come everywhere, in the United States and probably around the world. But definitely we have our share of frequent 911 callers that are brought to my attention. And what I'll do is, open up investigate and find out, what's the medical history, why are they calling, are there more resources we can get for them, and then we will get the EMS agency and public health involved if needed. But unfortunately, sometimes it takes them wanting to get the help.
Do we have to respond to the call?
We do. Yes.
Wow.
I mean, what if it's a real call?
Yeah, we do.
Well, some of those people who will call 10 times in a year, one of them is real.
Right, that's what I'm
Almost
saying. What
always,
if it's
yeah.
the-
It's not, it's just the other 9 times they didn't need to call at all. Something San Francisco did, by the way, is they created mental health response units, given all the drug problems, everything else. So they have actual units that go out that are mental health focused only. So when they have these mental health calls, the typical EMS crew doesn't go out. It's a mental health response unit, similar to what Connecticut did.
Well, I noticed on in the Daily Post, they have the police calls listed by city and so forth there, and a lot of them, maybe a third of them, involve drug problems, drug overdoses, and things like that. When it's in there, have we also responded to that call?
Yes, and if it's in our area and there's a drug overdose, definitely we are called as well.
Yeah, that seems like a waste of resources in a way. Not to respond at all, I'm just saying to send out both the police and fire just seems like too much.
Well, there's 2 elements of those calls, though. One is the safety element, which is the police side of it, and then there's the medical side of the overdose. So if I was a medic, I wouldn't want to respond on an overdose without PD there. And if I'm PD, I don't want to respond and be expected to take care of the medical side.
It is collaborative.
Our overdoses are typically have kind of a potential for violence or something in them.
Yes, they
Yes.
can.
Depends on what the overdose is, in the environment.
My ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, some overdoses are just unconsciousness, and those are generally pretty safe, but even those, once you administer something like Narcan, they can go from unconscious to violent in 30 seconds.
So how, do we send the person then to the hospital? And does the police just accompany the ambulance?
No, the police don't usually go with them for any reason. They're just there on the scene for protection.
If police have taken them into custody and forcing their medical transport, then police stay involved. Otherwise, typically they go on the gurney and they're restrained on the gurney in the ambulance. and taken to the hospital.
Oh, I see. So their arms are,
They're just on full restraints.
got it. Okay, thank you.
Any more questions on this part? Because I'm gonna basically offer, I'll call it a recommendation, or if the board has any specific direction, but I think it's been helpful sharing with you how this all is derived and how we measure things. I think what would be best is if I get together with staff and come up with some possible recommendations to the board for some response time objectives moving forward, and take it to the board and get some feedback from you on what that can look like. So I would love to, rather than just having the LIMSA, requirement on there, also have some metrics that the board has approved and we believe are feasible and possibly attainable and achievable, maybe aspirational. And then we can also, what was the word? We rescind that resolution? Yeah. And actually come up with things that we're going to measure and have some internal expectations for the decision.
Hey, Chief, does the county emergency services, do they have like a planning and inspection unit, or does the county have one where they, every 3 to 5 years, to go through an inspection list to make sure that they're in compliance with their goals and objectives? Do they have that?
Which agency?
County. Since they're doing our dispatch, do they have like any?
Oh, got it. I mean, they're an accredited dispatch center, so, I mean, is that what you're talking about, the public safety communications?
Right.
Yeah, I think they're an accredited center, so I know they go through something in order to be accredited. I can get that information as to what the actual process is.
Yeah, he would be interested. I don't know if I can only speak for myself as to not only the standards, but if they are above the standards relative to what's required, and if they have an inspection and planning group that actually goes through their dispatch center to see, like we're fortunate to have Todd running our training stuff. I mean, he's got outlines, lesson plans, learning designs, all this type of stuff. And, does the county have all that? When they train dispatchers or their people that receive their calls. I mean, that would be something that I'd be interested in, just to see what their baseline is.
I sit on, Chief Sampson from South San Francisco, and I are the liaisons from the county chiefs to PSC, so we meet with them monthly just to talk about things that I can ask them on there. Natasha's happy to share that information.
You could have something.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so just real quick, I think it's important that we come up with some kind of objectives and to your point, rescind kind of the one that's out there that's really not valid and doesn't really apply. With that said though, I'm far less interested in us setting goals and objectives than I am doing a deeper dive into the data and asking ourselves, what are some of the things we can just improve on? So the kind of the theory of continual improvement based on what the data tells us is much more interesting to me. So I think we need to set those objectives, but for me personally, I'd be happy if you just set the objective based on what we're currently accomplishing so that we take care of the idea that we have a bad resolution out there from days past or one that doesn't apply or is not accurate, whatever, however you want to characterize it. But I'd rather more of the staff time actually go to looking at things like travel time and turnout time and asking ourselves, what part of the turnout time is costing us a lot of time? How do the stations affect it? How does time of day affect it? All those things. And same thing with travel time. It's like, okay, well, are there routes and are there areas that are pushing our numbers way up? And if we were to exclude these 5 calls in these 5 areas, all of a sudden the response time everywhere else is great. We have a problem in these 5 areas. So identifying kind of the hot spots where we can make change, to me, is more valuable than just measuring things.
I agree.
It's kind of what does the data tell you?
Yeah, and it'll determine the possible solutions that we could
Yeah.
put out there. And, I mean, for me, as you know, I mean, for me, it's working with the cities too, to deal with potential impediments. Because that route thing that you brought up, Gary, was significant for me, because the routes, the traffic, I mean, you never know what the streets are gonna look like 3 years from now. or-
Yeah, we may find that none of those streets are currently the problem anyhow, but we haven't looked at it, so we don't know.
Right.
If we look at it and we go, oh, Middle Avenue is always a disaster, now they just made it worse with
Yeah.
traffic calming,
Yeah,
then we have a real story to tell.
yeah, with our, actually partners who should be working with us on these types of traffic issues, in my opinion.
So,
I don't disagree with what's just been said, I think we should do that, but I would like to see us aim for a real breakthrough in terms of a fast response unit, under 5 minutes to deal with the survival after a heart attack, with an aging population and so forth. And it could be a drone delivering an AED. It could be AED training for the populace. It could be any number of things. I mean, we've talked about it, and I know the firefighters hate the idea, but putting a paramedic on a motorcycle and going to the call alone initially, and then have the engine or the truck join them later or something. But I think we need to do something that would get us there so that we can improve the survival opportunities for heart attack victims.
one last question, one last comment is, in this report, I mean, when it was done, I don't know if I was around at the time, but there's some interesting nuggets ideas in here that, besides the ones we talked about so far, but there are some ideas that point to certain further investigation of this, or recognition, or at least for me, clarification. For example, in the page 4 of the report, it talked about state mandated fire codes, and then it talked about for the foreseeable future, the district will need both first firefighter units, and I'm not sure what that means, and effective response force, first alarm, coverage in all parts of the district. So for me, I'm not sure, I don't know what that, it sounds good, but I'm not sure how that really relates to response time. Will that increase or decrease response time? But the recommendation from the consultant saying this would be, it sounded like it would be something to explore, but I'm not sure where does it relate to in terms of impact, the response time. The response time is kind of shorten the response time based on the data that we need to look at to see where we fall short or where we need to improve. Would these recommendations become part of the solution in terms of decreasing the response time?
So I'll go through that report and see, now a good amount of this, again, these were recommendations from 2015,
Right.
where it was talking about the inequity between east and west.
Yeah.
And a lot of that was resolved by the addition of additional personnel and equipment
Right.
that was sent, basically repurposed or added to the east side. So I think the balance, and again, this will come out as we dig into the data and the stations to see if we're underserving any particular neighborhoods or communities by looking at not just the cumulative data of every station lumped all together, but for each station to see if we're missing the mark on our kind of metrics or benchmarks, and which I think it'll come to light, and then we can address it if there's an issue. I think a good amount of it was addressed by the additional resources that was supported by the
Yeah, I just don't know what they were making reference to in terms of talked about a first due firefighter. It sounds almost like a Chuck is saying, putting down the bike and sending my, I'm not sure that's the same.
Which,
same thing.
where are you?
Where are you?
Page,
Don't tell us the page, tell us what, it's, because there's two page 44s and so.
no, I didn't say 44, I said page 4.
Right, that's what I thought you said.
Page
It's
4.
not- And Michelle's number is 18.
18.
Right in the middle of page 18.
Right in the-
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Are
there,
you talking about the, will be both first due firefighting unit and effective response force coverage?
right.
Okay.
There are some limits throughout this report, and I noticed in 2015, whether we actually have moved and tried to integrate those recommendations, or if the recommendations, because it seemed like it was tied into response time, and here's a recommendation, and whether we have instituted those recommendations or not, I'm not sure. The thought is that
Excuse me.
rather than trying to create a whole new report, we just kind of see how the recommendations that was mentioned here are still applicable or not. I assume that they are, since it's been time looking at what could be some alternative ideas.
I think it's fair, like, as I mentioned, the report came out with this, and the board and the fire chief at the time addressed it. I don't know that we ever followed up to see if we were successful with the efforts, right? So both the first two response refers to the initial engine company, and the effective firefighting force was, typically on a structure fire, it's like, how long does it take, not just for the first engine to get there, but 3 engines and a ladder truck and a battalion chief, and we should be able to staff that up adequately too. A lot of adding the additional battalion chief and the ladder truck over here was to also address that effective firefighting force. But we can go back and, it's back to Director Bloom's point about digging into the data and seeing if the data will tell us whether we hit the mark or not.
Yeah, that's an important thing.
Yeah.
I mean, to create a new, get another consultant on that, so.
I hear you loud and clear.
Oh, sorry.
Just in a sense, complimenting what you just said, I think we should add as a major performance indicator the arrival of the second unit on site. Because one, other people use that, but more than that, what I understood is if an engine responds and there are 3 firefighters on the engine, they can't really do much of anything until another vehicle arrives that can add a 4th. They can't go in and fight a fire, for example.
We have that 2 in, 2 out requirement. That
Exactly.
Unless we have an active rescue, we're not supposed to make entry.
Yeah, so
But
it
it
seems to
doesn't-
me that they need to be able to do something before it's worthwhile even having them there. So I think the second, because the effective fighting thing, that's variable depending on the nature of the situation. Whereas the second unit seems like it's always relevant.
We can try measuring that, see what it is.
But even if there was like a bike accident, a kid fell off his bike, wouldn't a second vehicle go to that?
Not necessarily,
Is that right?
yeah. If it's just a bicycle into a tree, or even a bike versus a vehicle, it's usually an engine in an ambulance. It just depends if there's any entrapment or anything like that.
Does the battalion chief vehicle count as a second vehicle?
If it comes in as an accident, a vehicle accident, then you get a vehicle accident response, which is an engine, a truck, and a battalion chief, and an ambulance. And then the first arriving unit can cancel the others based on the.
What I mean is, does the battalion chief count as the 4th person if necessary?
For 2 in, 2 out.
Two truck, they can, they do it voluntary agencies all the time.
But then the juncture, this is evaluation, with you and your senior staff. Should we, since this was done in 2015, should we look at a additional fourth firefighter on an engine?
The chief handled that.
Would that be-
That's up to the board. I mean, that's the NFPA recommendation, but it's cost prohibitive in most
Yeah.
places.
Well, it says there's 3, I refer to page 19 or page 5, you know, whatever, that it's a finding that present 3 is fine. Well, of course, an aerial truck needs the extra body, but should we be looking into a 4th?
You know, and again, it's something labor groups are always interested in adding staffing. I'm not sure
I'm talking about
if
the
it's the
safety.
most, the most effective. I'm like, because this comes up in conversations, would it be better for us to add a 4th person onto every engine, or would it be better for us to open 2 new stations? Right? Safety-wise, it's probably safer, but service to the public-wise, more stations might make more sense. The cost would be, except for the infrastructure, might be about the same.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sure a factor would be, you know, let's say that the captain of a truck is a paramedic, and he's the only paramedic, so he should be in a supervisory position and not be the one that's actually working on the patient, but he or she should be the, you know, controlling or supervisory function for the engine, and then in turn if another engine shows up. So we get that type of shortage with paramedics, where that we have captains that are paramedics.
Occasionally, when we have rules in place, like for bid night that just happened, a primary medic, other than the captain, even if the captain's a paramedic, has to bid every single engine, or I'm sorry, every single apparatus. There are times for a shift or 2. We have a rule that says you can't be for more than a tour, you can't be the captain as the only medic. So we'll road another paramedic off another engine to make sure that doesn't happen. Because you're right, in some cases,
So
it's difficult to provide patient care and run the scene.
Okay, thank you. I'm just thinking out of the box, you know, trying.
I have some really good direction for the board. You ready to move to the next item? Perfect. What I'm going to do is, since we've got 45 minutes left, you guys didn't have the specific order I was going anyway, so I'm going to pivot a little bit and have Melanie start, because I think there's some overlap and we can talk about
Yes.
all the things and also get the good stuff out of you. You have to, you can, if you're comfortable sitting here, you can
Yes,
sit
I
here.
am
You want to
definitely.
use your computer or mine?
Whatever you prefer. I can
doesn't
send you
matter.
the PowerPoint if you'd like.
Just, you want to plug it in over here?
Plug it in and check in the battery, yes, it's good.
I've got a cable here to charge. You have enough juice in your computer?
Yes.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm not gonna mess with your phone there. There, and let me just get my notes.
As Melanie is loading that up, and this we'll kind of have this dovetail into Melanie's talking points and presentation. We'll probably have an opportunity to talk a little bit about the AMR contract, a little bit about the RFP process, the concept of 201 rights, and we also want to share some of the things, as we talk this subject right here, so talk about the ways to possibly improve our EMS delivery that we offer here in our fire district. Part of that is going to also be sharing with you the really progressive things that we've already done. We're really fortunate to have Melanie, incredible paramedics, and a wonderful relationship with Stanford too. Just so many, I'm amazed every day as I see what we get to do, being especially in this special area of the county, for that money. So you,
Thank you.
and maybe some.
Yes, yes, a couple slides for you as well. So I'm here to talk a bit about the EMS system and some improvements that have been made in the EMS system as well. And starting with how EMS services are delivered in San Mateo County. What we have here in this county is our EMS services are delivered through a public-private partnership. Fire departments throughout the county provide the paramedic first response capabilities, and the private ambulance company AMR provides paramedic staffed ambulance transport. Some of the key features of this system includes a centralized dispatch center for all 911 medical emergencies, a response time-based contract for ambulance and fire departments within the county, which I know we've talked about a bit, and a fast paramedic response with the dispatch of the closest fire engine and ambulance to every medical incident. Of note also, here in Menlo, we provide 3 additional ALS units that are not funded by the county contract. So we are contractually obligated to provide 7 ALS units. However, we provide 10 here in our district. Any questions on that one before I move up to the next slide?
So that's basically the engines plus the 2 trucks plus the squad?
Correct.
We're required to have 7 and we have 10.
So
It's a good argument when I yell, scream.
So we've increased our response for our
Yeah.
community. That's great.
Great.
All right, moving on. I wanted to talk a little bit about 201 rights. So 201 rights is California Health and Safety Code, Section 1797.201, which was enacted in 1980 under the EMS Act. The Act created the current legislation, the California EMS Authority based in Sacramento, and the local EMS Services Agency in each county, which we refer to often as the LEMSA. This act is intended to benefit and regulate the established EMS infrastructures within California. That's why it was created. 201 rights are often referred to as grandfathered rights within this legislation piece. 201 rights mean that fire agencies and cities that provided EMS services on or before June 1st, 1980 can retain the pre-existing services until an agreement is reached with their LEMSA. The California Supreme Court has construed the word retain to mean that cities and fire departments may only provide those services they were providing at the time the EMS Act was enacted. So for example, a city that did not provide ambulance services before the 1980 Act cannot later claim the right to provide ambulance services. In this county, the only one that has retained their 201 rights is South San Francisco. Our neighbors, Palo Alto Fire, was also able to do that as well. So that's 201 rights in a nutshell. Any questions on that?
What were they thinking?
That's why it's difficult for us to have our own ambulance service here without.
What were they thinking at the time?
Yes.
I'm just trying to process this. It's crazy, you know.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, and I may get ahead of Melanie here, I might give you a dirty look if I do, and it will be too late. But it doesn't mean that we couldn't collectively, all of the fire agencies in the county, come together, create a JPA, and actually bid on the RFP and provide ambulance services under contract to the county. We would have to compete for that RFP every 10 years? I don't remember. It's 5 years for a 5-year extension. Yeah,
It's
so-
5 years now.
And when you say we, you mean our fire district?
Well, understand this, is that, I don't know, do we have a single ELA for the whole county? But generally, the county expects that the ambulance provider will provide service
For the whole
for the
county.
entire county minus South City.
Right.
So we
But they-
couldn't just carve out the fire district and go, we'll bid against, we'll take the RFP for this piece. It's a whole enchilada or nothing. And so it's hard. It's a big one to, and many fire agencies are trying to do this throughout California. And it's quite a big fight. But back over to you, so.
Any other
Did I
questions from?
steal any of your thunder there?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, it's a great explanation. Any other questions from the board? Yes?
You know, I was curious if you have any inside information about why the county rushed to do the second 5-year contract instead of talking to the agencies and so
Because no one
forth.
else paid for it?
I mean, is this corruption or is it,
Right?
I don't know, why, do you mean the initial in 2019, the first
No,
contract that they
the
went?
one, the renewal in '24.
Let's
So
talk
you
about
mean
the
the extension?
Yeah.
I didn't know even that, I mean, they kind of snuck through, it seems like.
The chief
That's-
has more,
That's
chief has
what
more
his point
insight.
is.
That
Chief has
happens-
more
It
insight.
happens pretty frequently,
Yeah.
where as long as the current provider, AMR, is complying with the terms of the agreement, it's almost automatic. Sometimes it doesn't even need to go to the board. The LEMSA on its own, I don't know, along with the EMS commissioner or whatever, can just approve the extension. So sometimes it's just. Same thing happened down south in Ventura County before I came up there. We go, what? Huh? You know?
Yeah.
But that's just, it's pretty easy. That extension is almost automatic, assuming you are complying, air quotes, complying with your response times.
It seems almost corrupt in some ways, and I just wondered if, I mean,
Maybe the only
nobody's saying the word corrupt, but I don't know. It just didn't seem right to me, and nobody had a chance to talk about it or even bid again or anything.
It's pretty standard across the state for those transport agencies, those private transport companies to get basically automatic renewals for, it's kind of almost like a fait accompli. Once you get it, unless you're terrible, you're going to get an extension.
So, I know you probably will too, so is the agency within our district, are they competent? Or
Are they competent?
Are they meeting their
Sure.
performance standards?
I think they are. I mean, the LEMSA monitors their performance metrics, and, according to whatever reports LEMSA puts out, they're complying with the terms of the contract. Yeah.
So why would we want to?
Why would we transport?
Yeah.
It's easier for me to say it than for Melanie to say it, because my personal opinion is that fire departments, public agencies that provide services are generally better at providing these emergency services when there's not a profit motive, right? Because AMR or Falk or fill in the blank for private ambulance companies are trying to do the minimal amount necessary in order to comply with the standards. And that means putting less ambulances on the street. As long as they're within their things, they don't want to spend more money than they need to in order to comply, right? And fire, public service agencies don't do that.
Yeah, I don't want in any way want to defend kind of what's occurred or defend the profit motivation, but part of the model is also has to do with the more rural areas of the county, because if all of the districts or all the departments in the popular areas, if they all took over their own ambulance, somebody still has to cover these other areas that have much lower call volume and are very, very difficult to make profitable. So part of what's going on is you're looking at the demographic of the entire county and the spread of the county. Santa Clara has the exact same problem because you head out towards Morgan Hill and Gilroy, get some real remote areas. And if all of these things were all centralized to the big cities, these rural areas would be like rural hospitals, there wouldn't be any, essentially. So the coverage would just be awful. So part of it is to give uniform service throughout the county versus good service in one part of the county and lousy service in another part of the county. So there is some rationale behind the process. Like I said, I'm not defending the renewal or anything else. I can also tell you that down in Santa Clara, if you look next door to Santa Clara County, they made an attempt to get away from AMR. They went to Rural Metro for one of their contract periods and immediately went back to AMR. I think it's safe to say that the general consensus was the Rural Metro experiment was a complete failure. So there is a concentration of ambulance companies now, AMR being, I believe, the biggest in the nation by far. So finding ambulance companies that can actually service a county of this size is not a given.
I would say, the answer, if it was going to be provided by fire departments, it would have to be a regional approach.
It has to be.
Yeah, you cannot, yes, because you have to have a person, it's right now it's AMR, it's servicing even the rural areas, right? And so it would need to be something like that, if it was ever going to be successful and equitable.
Yeah, because you get over on the coast, and AMR has to respond, as does fire. They have to respond all the way down to Franklin Point to the county line, essentially. That's like a 45-minute drive from Half Moon Bay.
I mean,
to get
pretty
down
much
there.
it's the Bayside.
So that has to get covered just the same as we have to cover Menlo Park, Atherton, East Palo Alto, and North Fair Oaks.
The thing that concerned me from the last contract with AMR was that they got the DHS national contract to provide ambulance services for natural disasters. And, you know, if that happens, are they going to be pulling ambulances from our area in order to cover a huge disaster, let's say North Carolina or Florida?
They do pull ambulances from our area, but
But
just
are we gonna
like,
reach-
it's
yeah.
just like our mutual aid response, you know, when we send units, we backfill to cover the shifts and make sure the right number of engines are on duty. AMR does the same thing. They stage at these hurricanes. You can see pictures of them. I get pictures from friends that go on those stagings, but that doesn't reduce the number of ambulances that are here servicing the county.
Well, that's what I was concerned about, was the amount of ambulances that would be available to us if those types of things happen.
I do know that in some of the disaster responses, that they will fly their personnel to the location and ambulance will be supplied at the location.
That's good.
And that will take some backup personnel to come and fill the seats here as well.
I'm waiting for the issues.
Yes. Any other questions on
Melanie, can they
the
stop the poor people that have to sit in parking lots and ambulances waiting for calls for service? Is there a way that they can stop that? I mean, you know, you see that they're just.
That's back to the profit motivation.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If they provided housing and stations for them, their cost structure would go up dramatically. It's cheaper for them to have them sit in a parking lot.
In addition, that leads to response times, they don't have anywhere to go, they have to
Yeah.
sit in their ambulance.
All right, I'll be quiet.
So moving on to the ALS JPA and FRU monies, I know that she was going to speak a bit about that as far as the compensation.
Do you have talking points, Brett? 'Cause
All I really have is what's written there, and that
Okay.
the JPA contract was established in 1997 that we entered into, and that the overall compensation includes the annual payment to the JPA from AMR, and also for the 4 JPA supervisor units, and it's distributed by the JPA. I didn't know if you had more.
Sure, yeah, it's really interesting. This gives you a little bit of background. This is the ALS JPA that Director Solano currently sits on.
That cancels its meeting.
Yeah, that cancels its meetings. I sit on the management committee of it, but my understanding, I could be wrong, was AMR pays to the JPA, back, at least on the original document, it's $401,000 a month. It's gone up with a CPI inflator. There's initially a $4.8 million contribution to it. They pay that money into the JPA. It's these FRU monies that Melanie was talking about. With that money, the JPA funds dispatch services to the tune of, I don't know what it was, it's not enough for Mike Callaghan. We do some radio infrastructure improvements. We pay for JPA management, and then also some, they buy the fair laborers, don't they? Right?
Yeah.
And this goes back to what Melanie was saying. When it was initially started we must have had 7 ALS units, right? And so there was this pot of money, everybody had their number of ALS units and they divided it based on that. Other agencies have added more, we've added 3 more ALS units since, I think when the contract got in, we probably can reconfigure it so that we get a fairer share based on that. But I will say what this does, the reason the JPA was formed is the AMR can't make direct payments to us. There's anti-kickback laws and everything that prohibit those things from happening. I don't know how it's all managed to work out like that, but this is the money AMR pays to all of us to stop the clock. Right? They are, the expectation is that we're there at 6 minutes and 59 seconds. If AMR had to be there in that amount of time, they would probably have to double their number of units. Since we're already out there and ready to roll on calls, it just makes sense and it's efficient to have us get there with our paramedics and stop the clock for them. So instead of them having to be there in 6 minutes and 59 seconds, in suburban areas, they get to be there in 12 minutes and 59 seconds. That's different standards for the others. So that's the primary purpose of the ALS-JPA. I don't know what the JPA supervisor needs to do, but Melanie kind of does that for us. Anything else to add on that?
No?
Okay. Yes.
If we have certain requirements as an ALS unit, certain equipment we have to have and things like that. So I know we would have to do it for our 7 units. Would we, for the other 3 units, would we ordinarily do that anyway? Or are we doing it just to be good people and so forth?
What do you mean by would we ordinarily?
Would we ordinarily, whatever their standards are, whatever the equipment is, or whatever they require to bring it to that ALS standard?
Because not all of them have ALS, right?
Well, some
VLS.
All 10 of ours are
No, but
ALS.
it's throughout the county.
The county requires fire engines to be ALS, but not truck companies.
Correct.
We choose to make our truck companies ALS at all times,
Right.
and we have a paramedic on squad at all times. But with that, we had to purchase our own defibrillator, and they still supply us with, supplies and everything, but they're only contractually obligated for our 7 units. We're increasing our level of service by committing them, by paying money to.
But would we do that because it's the right thing to do, or? I don't know what's required, I'm just wondering if it's.
Oftentimes, those units end up, when engine 2 goes on call, they'll call me after the truck responds, and then you get the same level of EMS.
Do we have to pay for inspections or anything like that?
Pay for them, but they do annual inspections where they come and check all your units and make sure you have all the required things. We just had them.
And do they check all 10, or do they just check 7 of them?
They just randomly come in and check 1 or 2.
So are all 10 available for mutual aid, or is it just the 7?
They're all available. We were never, back when Chief Shabelhon was here, he had a desire to keep one of our trucks, and we had the second one in district at all times, but the system doesn't really work that way, where you can hold one back and not let it go, because it's part of the system where it is.
He told us he was doing that.
Well, depending on whether we're in, for the dispatch system. Yeah, depending, what's the one called where we go closest? AVL. AVL is just gonna, if you're logged in as an ALS unit, you're an ALS unit. You could not log in as one. I mean, you could hold yourself out, but that's a totally different conversation.
Well, I hope our district is not exposing us to the absence of equipment or the absence of capability because we're making all these units available to everybody and not getting a penny for it. That
is the.
I would look at it the opposite way. The vast majority of our calls are EMS calls, and we're carrying 3 extra ALS units to respond to EMS calls within our district.
for us, as long as we can keep them in our
Well,
district.
they're mostly responding in our district. I mean, do they go mutual aid? Of course they go mutual aid. They do auto aid. But generally speaking, if we have 10 ALS units that are assigned in Menlo Park, we're going to have better EMS response time than if we only had 7. I mean, there's no way to look at it any other way other than we've enhanced our service by having 3 extra ALS units
Yeah,
Well,
I-
on every shift.
Within the
I
county,
agree.
most every agency us staff say ALS for their trucks, even though they don't have to.
So
We are providing better service for our constituents.
what is our objectives here tonight for this presentation?
Oh,
Is it for information?
Yes,
only, or is
well, some of it
something-
was, again, it was informational to, because the conversation will come up oftentimes at board meetings, like, let's just provide our own ambulances or do things like that. So some of it's just a little bit of background so the board understands what our limitations are. The county really has all the controls. I mean, it's their responsibility outside of South City to ensure there's ambulance transport there.
Right, so that financial gap is what I want to talk about next.
The financial gap with the JPA, helpful. And then it's also, so some of it's informational. Some of it is also, was kind of a conversation about, we have the financial resources to enhance our services here. And so some of it was just that conversation surrounding, if we could do some things, how would we like to enhance the service we deliver via EMS?
And so, you jumping into that particular interview or with Craig will help enhance the quality of work that we do.
Sure. I mean, primarily what we, in theory, I think the majority, or 70% of our costs, 60 to 70% are medical costs, right? So, that is a great way for us to, figure out, is there something that we can do that makes us better? Part of what Melanie was sharing too was some of the things that we've already done to enhance our services and kind of plant some seeds in your minds about some ideas you might have for other things. Dr. Bernstein already brought up the idea of fast response units or something on drones. And some of the articles we gave you were just kind of to help you creatively think, like, what's out there? What are other people doing? I think there's probably some simple things. We have some ideas of things that we can do in initial steps, but I was really just trying to share with the board why things are the way they are. Why is AMR our transport company? Why can't we transport?
So the question is, and I know we're running out of time, only about 20 minutes, is that I want Melody for you to finish, but I want us to also the board to think about whether it's something that each individual think we should go there. We should actually invest time and energy into increasing our service in that area.
In what area? Our fire district already has enhanced services, so my whole thing is, there's this gap that the county manager wants us to pay into. And so where are we in all of that? We're not, it sounds like the JPA isn't,
Certainly.
I know, but they, see, so anyway,
I would love to hear Melanie's ideas of what we could do differently.
yeah.
Because I
Well, I'm
thought
not
that
saying-
was
I'm not
part of
saying-
what we were trying to do tonight.
But I do want to talk about the financial gap, because it's,
Yeah, but she spent,
As part of a further action, then we also need to get into the financial stuff, but let's hear
it's
what,
already been out there, probably, okay.
we need to follow the process.
I've been talking to
I'm
Louise
talking about for
Robert.
tonight.
Yes.
We finish this off and then we get into that question, because I don't think we all talking the same different language. I think we just need to get the information so we can complete that process and then decide what the next step would be. So Melanie, if you could.
Move on?
Yeah.
Okay, so the next one, I know we've talked a bit about this already, and this is about the AMR's contract and the RFP process. As we had already spoke about in 2019, AMR was awarded the contract and had the option to extend, and it was extended until now, June 30th, 2029. This time, I don't want to say much more about that and go on to the innovations now.
Innovations.
After that, or
Yes, talk about, I think you should go to the innovations, and then as we are talking about some of the ideas, I will also share some of the ideas/challenges associated with trying to pursue in those principles.
Yeah, because I would love to talk about some of the EMS innovations that are currently happening in the county. One of those is the ECMO program out of Stanford. And what ECMO is, it stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. In 2025, the ECMO program at Stanford was integrated into our EMS policies. And what ECMO is, it's a pumping system that controls the flow of blood through the heart and lungs. And they use large bore catheters and external pumps to regulate the blood flow through the heart and lungs. This policy enables early recognition and treatment of critically ill patients. So if we have a patient who fits a certain criteria that is in cardiac arrest, what we do is we don't stay on scene and for that 30 minutes that the normal policy does require. We get going quickly and we let Stanford know that they have an ECMO patient coming in so that when the patient arrives at Stanford, they can get that ECMO machine on them immediately. And it does have significantly improved rates of survival for cardiac arrest patients. And that started in 2025. Although Stanford has had ECMO for a while, what they've done now is integrated it into the EMS system. It's great for us here in this area because we're so close to Stanford. So that's one of the great EMS innovations that has happened here. Another thing that we've been doing every year since I've been here for the 8 years and probably before, and I made sure there was a picture of Director Bloom in here because he joins us. On purpose. We have what we call the PAUSE program with Stanford, and it stands for Pediatric Workshop with Simulation. And what it is, it's a training course taught by nurses and doctors at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital. And they have to take actual pediatric cases and simulate them with high-tech, lifelike pediatric mannequins. So it's a great program. We do it every December. It might be a good idea, if Chief Lorenzen would agree, to have the directors come to observe this program to see what a great program it is. And check out Director Bloom getting in there and doing scary impressions. Another thing, and I didn't make a slide about this, but Chief Ellis might be able to speak about this, is that we do prioritize testing probationary firefighters on EMS skills. It's something other cities don't do.
We were just talking about, there's things the county does that are progressive with that, when we're talking about what mental fight is specifically. In the training world, TOs, part of every probationary test is they have 8 manipulative testing segments on each quarter of their probationary training. And 2 of them are always dedicated to medical. So you have to be just as proficient as your EMT or paramedic skills to pass probation as you do your fire skills. Because we as a district prioritize EMS as much as we prioritize fire. That's not the truth for everywhere in the county.
Okay. And so another couple medications that are new to the system in San Mateo County that our paramedics can give and the whole county can give as well. One is called Suboxone. And so Suboxone is a combination drug that includes a medication called buprenorphine and Narcan. And what it does is if a patient is in opioid withdrawal and agrees to this treatment, it helps suppress withdrawal symptoms and opioid cravings. So that's something that's new to our system. Also, another thing that's new to our system is that paramedics can now give acetaminophen, which can be used for pain and fever, and they can give that intravenously as well now. Next year, we'll be able to give that to pediatric patients who are febrile as well. So that's new, and that's a great non-narcotic pain analgesic that now our paramedics can give. So those are some new things that...
Is that in doses that would be prescription otherwise?
Which one, the Suboxone?
Acetaminophen? Is that?
You know what? I know it's over counter, but you can get prescription higher dose. You know, is that what you mean?
It's simply the delivery
It's the
method.
delivery, yeah, it's the fact that it's immediate
I see.
effect.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the delay of digestion.
And does that normally take a prescription? That's what I was trying to understand.
Oh, so do you need the IV form? Yes, it would take a prescription, yes. But it is a great new medication that we can give for pain and now for fever as well. So if we have somebody who's septic, we can do that.
febrile seizures in infants are the most common type of seizure, and basically the cure is to get their fever down. We do that with so now we can deliver it farther, way faster than trying to digest it.
And then lastly, now this is the stuff we're doing, this is pertaining to the articles that we sent you, and these are these new innovations that, we'd like to consider. A couple of them, one of them is drones, possibly delivering AEDs and/or Narcan. It can revolutionize emergency responses, reduce response times, and enhance patient outcomes, but there are some challenges that we would encounter, and those would be related to regulation and technological limitations. So that is something that we can consider and think about. And then I know we also sent you some articles about community paramedicine. And community paramedicine is a model that's been piloted all over the United States. And what it is a community-based healthcare that allows paramedics to function outside their traditional emergency response. These functions can include connecting patients to primary care services, providing in-home visits to people with chronic and complex medical conditions, and completing post-hospital follow-up care and offering education and health promotion programs. So it's just some things that we can think about. I know that there would be regulations, we would have to get the LEMSA involved, but, and then of course if there's any other that you might have, any suggestions, and I know Chief Lorenzo was talking about maybe some tangible things that would be easier than going through regulations as well.
So I have a curiosity question on the AEDs. So drones are one thing. I believe, at least in Atherton PD units, I believe all carry AEDs. Is that the case in Menlo? I don't know. I think that's the case in Atherton. I don't know for sure. Is that the case in Menlo Park?
I believe Menlo Park,
Also
PD and Atherton both have AEDs because we were making sure they were compatible with ours. So they're compatible so that we can come in and use their pads and just plug their pads into our monitors. So yes, I believe both cities have that.
But not East Palo Alto.
Not East Palo Alto.
Is there a reason for it?
I'm sorry.
Is there a reason
City funded.
why?
Well, it would take their police department taking that initiative to actually get those AEDs.
Train on that.
Does that you mean, is there a reason why East Palo Alto police doesn't? I would have to speak to them on that. I don't know if it's a financial reason or what.
I don't think it's a training issue because I think they're required to have CPR AED training as part of being a police responder. So it's not a training issue, I mean, equipment issue.
Mark?
Quick
Sorry,
question,
I
Mark,
think
are we looking at like the different types of drone delivery, like with that? Because I think in Half Moon Bay, there was a drone, and I don't know if it's a potential partnership opportunity, but there's a drone company out there that does blood plasma delivery. And I'm just, and so I mean, bigger drones, they do it overseas too.
Right. Yep. Well, so, no, we're not looking at it. These are just ideas. Obviously, we're dipping our toes pretty heavily as the drone's first responder thing. And there are opportunities coming. It may or may not be ready for prime time yet, but it's coming. They deploy personal flotation devices via drone.
Yeah.
There's a lot of opportunities out there for us to deliver AEDs or Narcan or fill in the blank about it. There's I think also some opportunities for us to increase our hands-only CPR training footprint in our community so that our very first responders, the public, early interventions with CPR, so important. So those are innovations we can do. We are, other very small things that we are trying to work on. Currently our squad that we have is not recognized as an ALS unit. When engine 1 goes out and they're still in quarters, we're working with PSC. It would be really very good for us to have them recognized as an ALS unit. So they can go to a call and then we still have an engine respond with them, but that's something that we're working on. Another idea that we had is we've had some challenges with AMR again. big challenge for us is we call ourselves being at the end of a cul-de-sac in the county, right? So all of our resources come from the north, nothing's coming from the south. It's like there's a moat where San Francisco Creek is and nothing crossing it. So sometimes we are left with very long extended response times, and we've had some informal conversations about the potential of us buying, as we call it, the box, that means an ambulance, to be in reserve status here, not part of their system status, so that we could at any point in time have an engine grab it and respond to the call so we can transport patients. Because sometimes we can have a 45-minute wait time for an ambulance.
Or like an agreement with Palo Alto.
I would love to figure that out. I've talked to the local EMS agency about, there's a boatload of ambulances at Stanford
Right.
that just, for whatever political reasons, can't come over here and respond as the closest resource. But it's interesting. There's a lot of politics involved in the different LEMSTAs, and the different counties, and the different contracts, and the different things. Yes, it can be super frustrating when all you're trying to do is do the right thing and do the good for Mr. and Mrs. Smith that needs your help.
That's it, if you bear up bad news, we have 5 minutes left for 9 o'clock. So can you kind of get to your next step?
Thank you.
5 minutes, thank you.
That's it.
What?
That was the end of my discussion.
I would just, oh, sorry, yeah.
I wanted to ask, with our legal counsel here, what's the risk to us just doing it? I mean, they're not going to put the fire chief in jail or anything. What if we just
We'll give them up.
bought
We'll give them up.
bought an ambulance and we transported someone when we had, and there was no coverage? Do we risk anything?
I mean, we need to look into it.
Okay.
I need to look into it, I don't have that.
Well, but you're saying it would
I
be
understand.
only for our fire district, right?
Yeah, I think those are the decisions that we have to get all the information and then come back and decide, yes, that's what we want to do. I think we're fact-finding right now, gathering information, so hopefully, in a future meeting, we can kind of have that question kind of mixed up and we can decide what we do.
And if it's, I'm willing, the reality is we could, it's very easy for me to have conversations with AMR and the local EMS agency to see what their openness is to something like that, with us having an ambulance. AMR, I think their bottom line is going to be they don't want to lose money, right?
Right, it's,
So, it would
it's a
be,
pretty solid
what would that,
product.
yeah, what would that be like?
Not covered.
And then I will also say, as we kind of ties up, the question is always about, the ambulance contract is up in 2029. The county's required to put out an RFP. We along with Local 2400, had AP Triton do a feasibility study to see whether or not it would be profitable to compete in that contract. I think the bigger challenge is that we have 10 different fire agencies and a bunch of city managers that aren't necessarily interested. And it's really hard as one fish in the pond to try and coalesce everybody, because you need everybody all in. And you also need, along with ambulance transport, comes risk and liability, associated with Medicare and Medi-Cal and people not paying. And I talked to Mike Callaghan, he goes, I don't want to be on the hook for that. If you guys want to do it, go for it. But the county doesn't want to be on the hook for the liability. Every city and city manager and city council would have to raise their hand and say, sure, we'll take our share of the liability. It's challenging to say the least. I think would it be best for the public? Yes, but the challenges. And also 2029, 4 years away, it's like we would need to be in the game, in the thick of it already right now to start prepping for what that, competing for an RFP. And also the interesting thing is the RFP is written by the LEMSA, and it's ultimately, I think, reviewed by the state, but they're very biased towards private ambulance transport, so there's a lot of challenges.
Well, yeah, I think politically, I think politics has to start now, especially with the cities, and really want to do it. And so whatever strategy you come up with, you need that is a big factor. And I think part of being able to put it, really test the waters and get people's feelings about, or cities' feelings about whether they could go on. It's going to take a ground and pound to make that happen. So I guess that's one of the decisions that the board have to make it. Is it worth it? Kind of get to that conclusion, is it worth it going down that road? And if it's so, then let's make it happen.
It would be helpful, by the way, if our council could look into, not a huge detailed thing, but look into the role of the county, because the county sits on both sides of these contracts. It's both part of the JPA and it's part of the ones that say we're not responsible for everything, and I don't quite know how the county can be in that situation.
Hey, Robert?
Any closing remarks?
Yeah, so my only comment would be, we spent about 45 minutes on what is about 65 to 70% of our response. I would hope that this doesn't check a box for the board that says we took care of this discussion. And a lot of the discussion was centered around a part we don't control, which is the ambulance part, versus the other ideas that Melanie had, and I think other ideas that are out there that may not have surfaced yet, of what we could do to improve the EMS response. So I would just hope that this isn't, okay, we took care of that topic, so now we can go on to number 3, 4, and 5 on the list. I don't think we've really addressed this topic.
I think this is the beginning.
I think this was good background information and everything, but I think there's a host of other things we should be thinking about doing to improve EMS response. Some of it district's done already. I mean, having 3 extra units is huge. Well, what if we had 5 extra units, or what if we had 7 extra units? So we can still affect change, even though the ambulance might take a while to get there. We could do things to get another paramedic there quicker, or get the first paramedic there quicker. I think we should be evaluating those things that we do control, and making sure we have thorough discussions on those.
I think I certainly concur with you. I think that we have had this initial conversation on it, and I think we need to kind of figure out what's the next step. Where do we go from here? Should we meet, try to plan for another meeting, if not this year, early next year, really kind of shift that out. I think the sooner the better, so we can, by the end of the year, or at least beginning of the year, be able to kind of have a plan of whether, how strong we're going to be, go forward to trying to make this thing happen. Or get to the conclusion that maybe it's not working, it's just trying to do it. But I think Gary got everything he said makes sense. This is just the first step of the way, first meeting, and I think we need to try to see if there's another link we can add to it. And that's for the conversation and stuff like that.
Robert, it's up to you to put it on the agenda.
Well, my term is up at the end of this year, so I only got 2 more months of this, so I
There's
think
plenty of time to do something.
there is plenty of time for some, but I think that, I'm going to refer that to the chief, because him and the staff is going to have to pull whatever information we need to have pulled together before a certain period of time. And I think in order to kind of put a time on, we can say tomorrow, but I don't think that's practical. But I think that's what the chief got to decide when it would be appropriate. It was here 10 years ago, and I think it will be here 10 more years, but I'm sure we need to move on rather quickly if that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I'll just share really quickly that this format was refreshingly helpful to not have a bunch of business that we needed to do other than be able to sit with you and share some information to you. I'll be interested to hear if you want to do it privately, just your feedback on whether this is the right way to do it. We're happy to do it in a board meeting if you'd like, or we can schedule additional study sessions or whatever, in the future. So, but you're right, Director Bloom. We didn't. That was a hurried attempt to address the EMS stuff, and there's still much more to talk about, and we will. And we'll figure out what the right format is based on your feedback.
The board members feel comfortable with this environment, or do you want to go back to the grind and having a board meeting, put on an agenda?
Well, my perspective on it is, if this is 65% of what we're doing for a living, and it affects the well-being of our residents that we serve as much as it does, I can't think of anything that's much higher priority for our regular board meetings than continuing the discussion. So I think we should use our regular board meeting format, carve out time, schedule time, and make part of the agenda addressing things like this to improve our service.
I agree, we could do this exact same thing in a
In a
regular.
regular board meeting. Yeah.
I think we can, we will be able to do certain things. I don't think we could have spent 2 hours or 3 hours like we did tonight, or at least an hour, a good solid hour, maybe 2. I think that's where the planning on the chief part, in terms of looking at what information needs to come back to the board in a priority fashion. Rather than him going out and do a bunch of homework and then come back and dumping all that into the board meeting. I don't think that's gonna work. I think we need to, the chief and I, since I'm the president, we can sit down and sort that out and bring the information back as you, or as you, if the board want all of it, you can bring it all back and then we'll just sit there until it's done. But I think this is more than just a
I
1 hour.
think you have to prioritize, you can't do everything, but you can do,
Absolutely, absolutely,
just put one thing on the agenda, that would be a big step forward.
absolutely. All right. I heard, if there is no, any other comments, then should I gavel us out?
Yeah, we're adjourned at 9:03, or 9:00, whatever, I can't
Say it so I can,
I can't, 9:04.
there it is. Okay.
Sorry, I can't read.
Okay, everyone, take leftovers home to loved ones.